Don't move. That was the first thing anybody said to me on the worst morning of my life, and it came from a woman I could not see, standing over my bed, holding a sword against my throat. Let me be clear about the order of events, because the order is the whole joke. I did not wake up and then get threatened. I got threatened, and the threat woke me up. My eyes opened because something cold was resting on my neck, and my brain filed that under problem before it had gotten around to filing anything else, including where I was and who I was. The room was 11 feet across. I know that because I built 2 of the walls. There was a bed, a table, a stool, a stack of talisman paper I could not afford, and a roof with 2 holes in it that I had been meaning to patch since the spring. And there was her, red and white robes, long black hair, loose, down past her waist, a veil across the lower half of her face and nothing across the top, which meant I got the eyes, and the eyes were the reason I stopped moving before she told me to. The sword was resting, not pressing. A sword that presses wants something. A sword that rests has already decided and is waiting for its hands to catch up. Her breathing was wrong, too shallow, too even, like somebody keeping count. And my cabin smelled of flowers, which my cabin does not, with something sharp underneath it. She was poisoned. I did not know that then. Who else has been here? That was the second thing she said, not a question particularly. Nobody, I said. Nobody comes here. Which was true, and which I had never once been glad about until that exact second. She looked at me for a while. I have no idea how long. Long enough that I became aware of my own pulse in the side of my neck, tapping against her blade, which felt like an extremely rude thing for my body to be doing in the circumstances. Then she reached down with 2 fingers, put something in my mouth, and kicked my jaw shut. I want to be accurate. She did not force-feed me gently. She did not hold my nose. She put a pill past my teeth with the efficiency of a woman loading a crossbow, and then closed my mouth with the side of her foot, and the pill went down because it had nowhere else to go, and because my throat, at that point, was making its own decisions. Then the sword was gone, and she was gone, and there was pink mist drifting apart in the middle of my room where a person had been standing. I sat up. 3 things about me before we go any further, because all 3 of them are about to matter. My name is Chen Guang. I am 19. My stepmother sold me to this sect during a famine when I was 5 years old, for grain, and I have not seen her since, and I do not know where she is. Second thing, my job here is gardening. In a sect full of sword prodigies and blood cultivators, I water plants in the outer section, and that is not a cover story, that is genuinely my listed duty. And the third thing is that there is a panel floating in front of my hands that nobody else can see, and it says Qi Refining, Stage 9, with both bars full, and it has been saying that for 4 years while I did absolutely nothing about it. Because the day anybody finds out what I actually am is the day I stop existing. That is the whole plan. That is the entire strategy of my adult life, decided that morning on that floor. Get strong in total secret. Look like nothing, for as long as it takes. It has been 10 years, and nobody on this mountain has worked it out yet. I'll describe the next 4 minutes honestly, because I think they say more about me than anything else in this story. I did not panic. I did not run outside to look for her. I did not go for help, because there was no help. And the word for a man who reports something like this in a demonic sect is witness, and witnesses have a way of becoming loose ends. I sat on the floor of my own cabin, in the dark, and I did an inventory. 1. Something is inside me, and I do not know what it is. 2. It has not killed me yet, which means it is either slow or it is not a poison. 3. The woman who put it there could have killed me at any point in the last 4 minutes and chose not to, which means either she needs me alive or she does not consider me worth the extra motion. 4. I am going to bet on number 4 being option 2. Then I got up and went to work because it was nearly dawn and I had plants to water. That's the actual first decision of my adult life, by the way, not any of the fights. A 19-year-old with an unidentified object in his stomach getting up and going to his shift because the alternative was being a man who did something unusual on the morning something unusual happened. Emotion-severing cliff, where I live, is one of 12 branches of the Heavenly Sound Sect, which is a demonic sect. Let me clear up what that word means, because I know what you're picturing. It does not mean we sacrifice babies. Nobody here has ever sacrificed a baby. It is far more boring and far worse than that. It means there are no rules about how you get strong. Blood cultivation, soul devouring, poison paths, techniques that require ingredients that were recently people. All of that is legal here, and if you are good at it, you are respected for it, the way a merchant is respected for a clever route. And it means there is exactly one rule about who you can kill. You do not kill your fellow disciples. That one they enforce like a religion, with a law enforcement hall and mirrors that see the past and a tower that eats your cultivation, and nobody in the history of this sect has ever gotten away with it. Everyone else in the world is unregulated. So we are not a den of monsters. We are a very well-policed neighborhood with a hunting license attached. The man who bought me came through the village on foot with a ledger. I have thought about that detail a great deal. Not a cart, a ledger. I do not remember my stepmother's face. I remember the sound of my father's brush because he was a scholar and sold his handwriting at a stall on market days. And I remember being hungry in a very specific way that I have not been since and have never fully stopped expecting. 14 years later, I had a cabin with 2 holes in the roof, a stipend of 10 spirit stones a month, and a shift. Sit with the gardening for a second. This is a sect containing sword prodigies, blood cultivators, a man who is one of the 10 strongest young cultivators in the region and can flatten a hillside as a warm-up. And my professional responsibility, my listed duty, the thing I was for, was making sure the heartbreak grass in the outer section didn't wilt. Heartbreak grass, incidentally, makes 3 different pills, all of them for other people. So that was the container the pill landed in. A gardener in a shack in the outer ring of the least fashionable branch of a mid-tier demonic sect. And I need to tell you the thing I had never told anybody, because otherwise none of the rest makes sense. When I looked at my own hands that morning, there was something floating in front of them that nobody else could see. A panel. Name, Chen Guang. Age, 19. Cultivation, Qi refining, stage 9. Qi blood, 100 out of 100. Cultivation, 100 out of 100. Divine ability, 1 out of 3. I had had it as long as I had had memory. It had never had a voice. It had never explained itself. It simply sat there, keeping score, like an accountant who had been assigned to me by an institution I had never applied to. I had worked out the rules the way you work out a stray animal, which is slowly and by being wrong a lot and mostly at night. Rule 1. When I tend spirit medicine properly with my hands, doing the actual work, bubbles come off it, small floating things. Nobody else has ever reacted to one in 19 years. White bubbles make my body stronger. Green bubbles make me better with a weapon, and which weapon depends on the bubble. Blue bubbles fill the 2 bars. Rule 2. When both bars reach 100, I can burn them and advance a realm. Not train, not meditate, burn and arrive. Rule 3, which I made myself and which is the only one that has ever mattered. Nobody can ever know. Because here is how a normal person goes from Qi refining to foundation establishment. You cultivate for years and most people fail. Or you buy a heavenly rejuvenating pill, which costs more than I would earn in 20 years. Or you find some once-in-a-generation opportunity in a ruin, and statistically, you die in the ruin. There is no fourth path. And a 19-year-old outer cliff gardener who demonstrably had a fourth path would not be congratulated. He would be opened. So I watered plants. For 4 years with both bars full, doing nothing at all, because the moment I did something, I would have to explain where it came from. And I did not have an explanation, and in this sect, an unexplained thing is just an unclaimed resource. 4 years is a long time to sit on a full purse in a room full of thieves. That night I stopped. Why? And the reason is not brave. It was not because a woman put a sword to my throat and I resolved to become strong. It was much smaller than that. It was that somebody had walked into my room while I slept, done whatever they liked to my body, and left, and there had not been one single moment in the entire encounter where anything I could do had mattered. Not the fight I lost, the fight I was not even in. So after my shift, in the dark, with the door barred by a chair that would not have stopped a determined child, I sat down on the floor and burned it all. I am not going to be poetic about what that felt like. It felt like being filled. Qi blood went first, and it went into my body, bones, sinew, blood, all of it thickening at once, and my ribs made a noise I did not enjoy and have never forgotten. Then cultivation went into my meridians, which is like watching a dry riverbed take a flood, and the flood does not care that the bed was not built for it. It took the whole night. Somewhere in the middle of it, my body stopped being a Qi refining body and started being something else, and I felt the moment it happened as a kind of quiet click, like a lock giving up. Foundation establishment. At 19. In a shack, alone, while the entire sect slept 40 feet away, and the panel gave me a present for it. Divine ability unlocked. Daily appraisal. 1 use per day. Look at a thing. Get the truth about it. Let me be precise about the word truth, because it is not description. It is not a label. A description tells you a sword is sharp. The truth tells you who made it, what it was used for, what is wrong with it that the seller has not mentioned, and what the man holding it is planning to do in the next 4 minutes. The truth, including the parts that the thing in question would very much prefer I did not have. I sat there with the single most dangerous ability I have ever heard of, in the dark, with my ribs still resettling, and I used it on my house. The cabin, poor construction, may collapse at any time. Thank you. Genuinely, extremely actionable. Let me describe what I did next, because this is the decision that shaped the following decade, and it took less than a minute. I did not celebrate. I did not go outside and look at the sky. I did not test my new strength on anything, which is what every single person in my position does, and which is how most of them get noticed. I sat on that floor and thought about it very carefully, and what I concluded was this. Power that people can see gets taken. Power that people cannot see gets kept. So the next morning I got up, put on the same patched gray robe, walked the same path to the same garden, and watered the same plants at the same speed as the day before. Foundation establishment. Publicly listed as Qi refining, stage 9. I would like to say I had a plan after that. I did not. I made that one decision and then spent 10 years paying the installments. Now, the woman with the sword. She had not come for me. I want that on the record, because for about a year I assumed she had, and I built a lot of very stupid theories on that foundation. She had come to my cabin the way a person with a broken leg goes into the nearest doorway. Her name is Song Ling. At the time, I did not know it, and if I had known it, I would have left the province on foot. She is the sect leader, not of a branch, of the Heavenly Sound sect, the Tianyin Witch. 60 years in seclusion, a name people in this region say the way farmers talk about a flood year, and she had come out of that seclusion mid-breakthrough, the single most vulnerable window in a cultivator's entire existence, and somebody had been waiting for her with poison. Explain why that sentence should not be possible. The location of a sect leader's seclusion is not written down. It is not delegated. It is known to exactly one other person, chosen for the purpose, and that person's continued existence is entirely dependent on it staying that way. That morning, at Hundred Flowers Lake, with the water still and the petals coming down on it, that one person came when she was called. Elder Lin Shui, acting sect leader for 60 years. White robes, no expression, a woman who has personally held this entire sect together while its head slept, and who could comfortably flatten most of the surrounding province. She landed at the edge of the pavilion and bowed. Song Ling was sitting. She was drinking something. She did not look up. Who knew where I was? And Elder Lin Shui, I have this from a much later conversation, and the way she told it was flat and careful, and she did not look at me while she said it, went down on one knee and understood in real time that she was the entire suspect list. She did not protest. That is the part that impressed me. A weaker person protests, and a protest is noise, and noise is how you find out where a person's floor is. She said, "I will find them." Song Ling told her to do it quietly, and to tell nobody that the sect leader was awake. Then she went back to her tea. That is the whole woman, right there in the first 5 minutes before I ever learned her name. No rage, no speech, no demonstration, just find it, silently, and everybody who might have betrayed me gets to spend an indefinite period of time feeling me look at them. I am going to say something now that took me 9 years to be able to say in a level voice. She is the most frightening thing I have ever stood beside, and she has never once raised her voice at me. She just hits me. We will get to that. 2 weeks after foundation establishment, a beautiful woman started being nice to me, and that is how I nearly died. Her name was Mei Long. Heavenly Joy Pavilion, which is one of the 12 branches, and specifically the branch where every single person is stunning, and every single person is smiling, and you should count your fingers when you leave. She was a senior sister. She was, by any measure, well above me. Foundation establishment mid-stage on paper, a known name. The kind of person whose arrival in a corridor rearranges how people are standing. And she started coming by the Spirit Herb Garden in the mornings to talk to the gardener. The first time, she asked about heartbreak grass. That is a genuinely reasonable question. It is the most valuable thing in that section, and there are 3 separate ways to ruin a bed of it, and I explained all 3, and she listened with her chin on her hand, and I remember thinking with total clarity that this was not happening. She came back the next day. I'll describe the actual experience because everyone assumes I was noble about it, and I was not. I was 19. A woman like that finds reasons to stand near you, and the male brain does something extremely predictable, which is generate excuses on her behalf at industrial speed, except mine did not. That was the first thing that was wrong. She would lean on the fence being luminous at me, and my pulse would sit exactly where it had been. She would put her hand on my forearm to make a point, and I would be thinking about drainage. She had the sort of presence that tilts a room, and I was standing upright in the middle of it like a fence post in weather. Not indifference. I want to be clear. I could see it. I could see, precisely and analytically, that she was beautiful, in the same way you can see that a sword is well made. There was simply nothing on the other end of the wire. For about a month, I genuinely thought I was ill. I lay awake in that cabin working through it. Is something broken? Is this what dying feels like? Because the only other explanation on the table was that a Heavenly Joy Pavilion senior sister was running a charm technique on an outer cliff gardener, and there was no reason in the world for that to be happening. There was a reason. I had not found it yet, and the reason was in my stomach. And then, in the 11th week, the sect started making lists. That is what a spy hunt looks like in a demonic sect. There is no announcement, there are no arrests. There is simply paperwork, quietly, everywhere. Branch rosters get requested, duty logs get copied. Somebody from the law enforcement hall stands at the end of the corridor for an hour, doing nothing in particular. And everybody starts being a little more careful about who they are standing next to. Mei Lan stopped coming in the mornings. She came at night instead. I had a lamp going and a sheet of talisman paper I had already ruined. She sat down on my stool without being asked, which she had never done, and she put both hands flat on my table, and she said she needed to tell me something, and I was the only person she could tell. Here is what she said, and let me give it to you the way I received it, because it was good. It was really good. I have thought about the structure of it many times since. She said she was not from Heavenly Joy Pavilion. She was a true disciple of the Luo Sha Immortal Sect. She had been placed here at 14. 6 years under alone, no contact, no support, in a demonic sect that would take her apart over 3 floors of a tower if it ever found out. And the lists meant the net was closing. She had one thing she needed to get out, a jade pendant. She took it out and put it on the table between us and did not push it toward me. And what she needed was somebody nobody watched to carry it down the mountain on an ordinary errand. She was not asking me to fight anyone. She was not asking me to lie to anyone. Some was asking me to take a walk. And when it was done, she said, she would take me with her, out of the demonic sect, into a real immortal sect, with real real elders and real resources and a real future, where a person's talent was measured instead of priced. I want to describe the feeling accurately because it was not greed. It was the best offer I had ever received in my life, and it came from the only human being who had been kind to me in 14 years, and I was 19, and I wanted it so badly that my hands were flat on the table to keep them still. And then I remembered that I had not used my appraisal that day. I did not look at the pendant. I looked at her, Meilan. Heavenly Joy Pavilion Disciple. Currently using her charm technique on you at close range. She requires a scapegoat to be found holding evidence when the spy hunt closes. If you accept the pendant, you will be discovered with it and executed as the traitor. If you refuse, she will kill you tonight, in this room, because you have heard her offer. I read it twice, word by word, both times. I'll tell you what a strange, quiet, cold thing it is to sit 2 feet from a person who is smiling at you and read the actual contents of their intention, in order, like a receipt. There was no anger in it. Anger requires surprise, and I had run out of surprise somewhere in the middle of the second reading. There was only arithmetic. If I refuse, she kills me now. If I accept, she kills me later, with paperwork. There is no version of this conversation where I walk out of my own cabin. She was still smiling. She had not moved. She had all the time in the world, because she was foundation establishment mid-stage, and I was chi refining stage 9, and everyone knew that. I looked over her shoulder and I said, "Master?" She turned her head. I have thought about that quarter second a great deal in the years since, and I would like to report that I hesitated, or that something noble happened in me. What actually happened is that my hands moved before my opinion arrived. The dagger went into the left side of her neck. She was faster than me. Of course she was. Even with a dagger already in her, she got a hand up and got most of a spell out of her mouth, and there was a moment, a real one, where I could not tell which way it was going to go. Then she was on the floor of my cabin with her fingers in the dirt, and she started buying herself sentences. She named people. That is what they do. She named a Golden Core senior brother who admired her. She named a branch that would burn the outer cliff for her. She got the beginnings of a promise out, something about how she could still take me with her, and her voice was very calm and very reasonable, and she got most of the way through it before it stopped working. I stabbed her 3 more times. That is not a boast. I want it recorded exactly as it happened, because it is the least heroic sentence in this entire story, and it is also the only reason I am alive. I had been foundation establishment for 11 days. She was a Heavenly Joy Pavilion senior sister with a dagger in her neck and a spell half finished. The gap between finished and mostly finished is where dead men live. Then I sat down against the wall and stayed there until my hands worked again. I would like to say I thought profound things during that time. I did not. I mostly thought about the floor, which was going to need replacing, and about the fact that I did not own a second dagger. At dawn, I walked up to the Cliff Master's residence and reported it. My master's name is Gao Lei. He runs Emotion Severing Cliff. He has a face like a shut door, and I have never, in 10 years, seen him look pleased about anything, including good news, including his own disciples surviving. I stood in his courtyard, and I told him that a Heavenly Joy Pavilion senior sister had attempted to recruit me as a scapegoat for the spy hunt, and that I had killed her in my cabin. He looked at me. The pause went on long enough that I began composing a second version. Then he said, "Go back to work." That was it. That was the entire response of a branch master to one of his disciples killing a member of another branch. Demonic sect efficiency. Let me be fair to it. In an immortal sect, that would have been a 3-month inquiry. Here it was 4 words and a man returning to his tea. The next morning, at dawn, when the appraisal reset, I used it on myself. I had been putting that off for 11 days, the way you put off a doctor. Heaven-severing goo poison. That was the pill. That was what she had put in me with 2 fingers in the side of her foot. It is not a poison the way you are imagining. It does not damage anything. It does something much stranger and much worse, and the description is short. It severs the host from desire, permanently. Charm techniques do not work. Beauty does not work. Seduction arts, illusions constructed out of longing, every technique in the enormous branch of cultivation that runs on making a man want something, all of it dies at the skin, with one exception. One woman in the world carries the matching half of it. In her presence, the entire thing switches off, and I become an ordinary idiot again. I sat on my floor with that for a while. So, a woman I had met exactly once, whose face I had never seen, whose name I did not know, who could have killed me with a thought, had installed a permanent modification in my body that made me immune to every seduction on earth except hers. I have some words about that. I have never used any of them out loud, but here is the part that actually mattered, and it took me an embarrassing amount of time to see it. That poison is the only reason I am alive. Meilan's charm technique failed on me. That is the only reason I got suspicious. That suspicion is the only reason I burned my 1 daily appraisal on her instead of on the pendant. And the pendant is what she wanted me to look at. Everything downstream of that, every single thing in this story, happened because a poisoned woman kicked my jaw shut in the dark and left without a word. I have never thanked her for it. I would like it noted that I considered it, once, seriously, and then imagined what she would say and decided against. 3 days later, the law enforcement hall came for me. They send whoever is available. What I got was a man named Wang Chen, and I need to introduce him carefully because he is going to be in this story for the next 10 years, and he is the strangest human being I have ever met. Golden core, late stage, mid-20s, pleasant, chatty, smiled the entire time. He arrived at my cabin with a case file and complimented my fence. He asked me 16 questions. Every single one of them was placed exactly where a lie would break, and he asked them in a friendly, wandering, apologetic order that made it feel like a conversation instead of a structure. I lied in a straight line for 40 minutes, and the next morning, when the appraisal came back, I used it on him. Because I am not a fool. Wang Chen, true disciple of the vast heaven sect. Born with the dragon's fury. Undercover agent within the heavenly sound sect's law enforcement peak. Fine. Alright. An enemy spy from the strongest immortal sect on the continent. Embedded in our internal affairs division. That is bad, and it is survivable, and it is exactly the sort of thing I now knew how to file. Then I read the second half of it. The reason he was here. He was bored. That is it. That is the entire motivation. A true disciple of the single most powerful immortal sect in the world had inserted himself into a hostile demonic sect's police force at genuine personal risk over a period of years because his life at home was not sufficiently interesting. And this man was going to be handling my case permanently because I was, in his professional assessment, the most entertaining object in the building. The verdict came down at the end of that week, and I want to walk through it properly because it is the moment I understood the shape of the world I lived in. Killing a disciple of another branch is not murder here. It is closer to a property dispute. The sect's position is that if you cannot hold your own asset, the sect is not a charity. So, 5 years of sect resources, stripped. That is my stipend, my allocation, my access to the branch's spirit medicine, gone. A travel ban, I do not leave the mountain. And a fine, 1,000 spirit stones, payable in 3 months. I earn 10 a month. I would like you to check that with me. 10 a month, 1,000, 3 months. I did the sum 4 separate times standing in the corridor outside, as though the numbers might soften if I approached them from a different direction. I want to be honest about what I felt, because it was not despair. Despair is for people with options. It was closer to the feeling of being handed a bill in a language you do not read by someone who is already walking away. Wang Chen actually stayed behind to explain it to me, which was kind of him in the way that a veterinarian is kind. He leaned on my fence and told me why the Heavenly Joy Pavilion cared. Their pavilion master is stuck. He has been stuck for a long time, at a level where the ordinary methods stop working, and the specific thing he needs to break through is a woman with a natural charm physique. Not a technique, a physique. They occur perhaps once in a generation across the whole region. They cannot be cultivated, they cannot be manufactured, and they are, in the internal language of that branch, cauldrons. Mei Lan was one. She had been found, raised, and reserved, and I had put a dagger in her neck in a shack over a bookkeeping error. So they're not going to forgive you, Wang Chen said cheerfully. That's not the sort of thing that gets forgiven. It's the sort of thing that gets waited out. Then he explained the fine. The fine was not a punishment. The fine was a fence. As long as I owed the sect 1,000 spirit stones, I was an outstanding sect obligation, which means I was sect property. And sect property does not get quietly disappeared by a branch master with a grudge, because that is theft from the sect. You're on a list, he said. Congratulations. That's your good news. Then he left, whistling, and I went home and looked at my 10 spirit stones and my empty resource allocation and the 3-month deadline, and I understood that I had been saved by a debt. I'll describe one small thing from that week because it is the moment I stopped expecting anything from anybody. I went to see my old bunkmates, Xu Jin, He Tao, Sun Bo. Boys I had come up through the outer sect with, who I had shared a room with for 6 years, who I had covered shifts for. I sat down and told them what had happened, and I watched all 3 of them lean back at the same time. Not dramatically, just an inch. The way you move when somebody puts something on the table that might be contagious. They were extremely polite about it. They asked the right questions in the right order and did not meet my eyes for any of them, and they got up as soon as it was decent to get up. Walking away, not quite far enough away, one of them said that I had always been a lucky encounter nobody, and now the luck had finished. I stood in that road for a second with it, and then I went and found paid work, because standing in roads does not clear 1,000 stone fine. 20 spirit stones a month, double my stipend, White Moon Lake. The job was tending a pure yang flower. That means hauling magma up a slope in a sealed vessel and pouring it around the roots 6 times a day, and standing downwind of it for the 2 minutes it takes to settle. And the reason it pays 20 is that the 2 minutes are the part that gets people. The senior sister who showed me the work was named Wu Jing, and she was, I think, the first person in the entire sect who was kind to me without wanting anything, which was so disorienting that I spent about a year waiting to find out what her angle was. She does not have one. She genuinely does not have one. I have appraised her twice, years apart, because I could not believe it either time. Remember her. She matters later, and not in the way you would expect. The elder who owned the flower was called Ling, and she was cold in the ordinary professional way, and she set the schedule and did not once ask my name. So, mornings in the spirit herb garden, days hauling magma, nights teaching myself talisman making out of a bought manual, because talismans are the one trade a nobody can practice alone, in the dark, and sell without anybody asking questions about where the skill came from. My first night of talisman making produced 3 spirit stones worth of ash. My second night produced more ash. I was not merely bad at this, I was spectacular. I ruined material for 5 straight weeks. There is a specific flat sound a talisman makes when it fails, a sort of apologetic crackle, and I heard it so many times that I began hearing it in my sleep. But it was mine, and nobody was watching, and every ruined sheet was a sheet that nobody had to know about. Meanwhile, the pure yang flower was going extremely well because I was cheating. Every single day, at dawn, I appraised it, not the manual. Not Elder Link's instructions, the flower, and it told me, precisely and in order, what it needed before it needed it. Too much heat on the 3rd day, root rot coming on the 9th, 2 days before any visible sign. A magma pore that should be split into 2 smaller ones because the vessel was oversaturating one side. So instead of ripening on schedule, it ripened 11 days early, and it ripened perfectly, better than the branch's records had on file. And on the last morning, when I came up the hill with the vessel on my shoulder, it threw off a bubble I had never seen in my life. Not white, not green, not blue. Purple. Divine ability fragment. 1 of 3. I stood there in the steam with my forearms burned pink to the elbow, and I laughed at a plant. Then I did the responsible thing, which was walk down the hill and report the early ripening immediately and accurately, because the single fastest way to lose everything is to get greedy at exactly the moment a thing starts working. The elder who owned that flower came to collect it in person. I was expecting Ling. What arrived was a woman in white who landed at the edge of the lake without disturbing the water. Elder Lin Shu. Acting sect leader. The most powerful person I had ever been within 100 feet of, standing in front of an outer cliff gardener with burned arms for a plant. She looked at the flower for perhaps 4 seconds. Then she paid me 40 spirit stones, which was twice what the job was worth and which I did not query. And then she held out a seed. Plant this, she said, at your residence. That was the entire briefing. No name, no species, no instructions, no explanation for why the acting head of the sect was personally assigning horticulture to a man on a punishment list. I said yes, because there is no other word available in that conversation. She left. I walked home holding it in my closed hand the entire way, and I did not look at it once, because looking at things in public is how people find out you can look at things. Now, let me describe what I did next carefully, because it is the single most important thing I have ever done, and it took about 4 seconds of thought. I did not plant it. I went home, and I put it on the table, and I sat and looked at it for the rest of the evening without touching it, and I waited for dawn. And then I used my 1 appraisal on it. Heavenly Fragrance Dao Flower. I want to give you the list of everything that name means in the order it arrived in my head. It is the thing every spy who has ever infiltrated the Heavenly Sound Sect came here to find. It is the thing Meilon died looking for. It is the reason this sect went from a 3rd-rate regional cult to a 1st-rank power in 40 years, which is a rise so fast that 3 neighboring sects have standing intelligence operations dedicated to explaining it. It is, by a distance, the single most valuable object in the province, and it had been placed in my hand with instructions to put it in the dirt in front of a shack with 2 holes in the roof. I sat down on my own doorstep, because I understood immediately, completely, and without any comforting alternative, what I was. I was bait. Somebody at the top of this sect had a spy problem that could not be solved by hunting. 12 branches, thousands of disciples, hostile powers with decades of patience. You cannot find a professional in that. So instead of hunting, she had decided to put a piece of cheese somewhere visible and watch which way people walked. And she had selected the cheese holder the way you select a rock to prop a door open. Cheap, available, already on a punishment list. Not a loss. Every single spy on this mountain was now going to be coming through me. So here is what I did. I planted it. I want to defend that, and I can, because the alternatives were refuse the acting sect leader, which is suicide with extra steps, hand it back, which is the same thing with a different verb, run, with a travel ban and a law enforcement hall that has a mirror that sees the past. I planted it, and then I spent 2 full days rebuilding my fence higher than a man, and planting a screen of extremely boring, ordinary spirit medicine in front of it, and rearranging the entire yard so that the single most valuable object in the region was the 3rd most interesting thing you would notice from the gate. And then I did the only remaining thing available to a man tied to a stake, which is get stronger faster than the people coming. On the 7th day, it sprouted. The wave of chi that came off it detonated the talisman I was working on, which cost me 3 days of material, and I did not care in the slightest, because floating above the sprout was a bubble the size of my thumb, purple gold. I had white, I had green, I had blue, I had, once, purple. The panel had never produced this color in 19 years. Hongmeng Heart Sutra, a cultivation technique, not a good one, a foundational one. The kind of thing that does not appear on any sect's inheritance list because it predates the concept of sect inheritance lists. Primordial purple chi. And it does 2 things. The first is that it makes everything I do stronger. Every technique, every strike, every seal. Purple chi does not add power to a thing, it changes what the thing is willing to break. The second is that it conceals cultivation. Appreciate the timing. I had spent every waking hour since foundation establishment quietly terrified that one person would look at me a half-second too long and see a number that did not match my robe. It was the load-bearing anxiety of my entire life. Every conversation, every corridor, every time somebody from another branch glanced at me. And the plant I had been handed as a trap solved it on day 7. I switched techniques that night. That is not a small sentence. Switching a cultivation technique means dismantling the foundation you have been building since childhood and rebuilding on a different one. And doing it wrong ends your progress permanently. Sane people do it under supervision, in a sect facility, with an elder standing by. I did it on the floor of a cabin, alone, at 20, with a corpse's worth of enemies I had not met yet and a fine hanging over me, because the alternative was going on being visible. It took 4 days. 2 of those days I do not remember well, and on the morning of the 5th day, I walked out into my own yard, and the flower gave me 2 blue bubbles. Cultivation, +1. Chi blood, +1. Every day, forever. From a plant I was legally required to keep alive. Somebody had chained me to a stake, and the stake turned out to be a staircase. I did not sleep properly for about a week after that. I kept getting up in the night to check it was still there. Twice I went out with a lamp at what must have been the 3rd hour to look at a seedling. 2 months later, I was foundation establishment mid-stage, and I had 926 spirit stones. Enjoy that number for a second because of what it meant. It meant the fine was survivable. It meant I was going to live through the year. It meant that the debt that had been placed on me as a leash was going to come off, and that the fence Wang Chen had described was still standing while it happened. I had 74 to go and 11 days to find them. And the day I worked that out was the day a woman came to look at my yard. She arrived at the fence around midday, when the light was worst for seeing over it, which I noticed at the time and thought about a great deal afterward. Fairy Mingyi, Golden Core early stage. She said she had heard the outer cliff had good soil, and she asked, very pleasantly, whether it was true that we grew heartbreak grass out here, and stood at exactly the height and angle where a woman would be able to see the 2nd row of the garden. I told her about heartbreak grass for 11 minutes, thoroughly, including the drainage. She left. I appraised her the next morning. Heavenly Saint Sect, candidate Holy Maiden. Undercover in the Heavenly Sound Sect, currently locating the Heavenly Fragrance Dao flower on behalf of her sect. A candidate Holy Maiden, which is not a spy in the ordinary sense. That is, a person being groomed to lead a sect who has been sent into a hostile power personally on a mission with no extraction plan because the target is worth a future sect leader. That is what was on the other side of my fence, asking about drainage. And here is the thing that has kept me awake more than the rest of it. She did not find it. She stood 4 feet from it and did not find it. But she also did not leave. 9 years later, she is still on this mountain, still pleasant, still occasionally at my fence. She has helped me twice, genuinely, at cost to herself, for reasons I understand perfectly, which is that a patient hunter feeds the animal. She is playing a very long game, and I am the terrain it is being played on. That is the situation then, at 20 years old. That is my starting position. A cheat nobody knows about. A poison nobody knows about. A flower that makes me stronger every day and will get me killed by 4 separate organizations the moment anyone sees it. 74 stones short on a fine that is the only thing keeping a branch master off me. A holy maiden at my fence, and an unreadable owner who visits without warning and has informed me that my continued existence is contingent on horticulture. I would like to state, for the record, that I never asked for any of it. I asked for the plants to not wilt. 11 days later, I came home at dusk with a full water can and found a woman standing under my tree. I'll describe what happened in my body because it is humiliating and it is load-bearing. Everything switched on. 9 months of the heaven-severing goo poison making me a walking stone, and it came off all at once, like a door opening on a furnace. My heart went somewhere it had not been since childhood. Every instinct I owned stood up simultaneously and began shouting in different directions. And underneath all of that, threading through it, was a smell I recognized from the worst morning of my life. Flowers, very faint, something sharp underneath. Red and white robes, hair down, standing absolutely still in the middle of my courtyard, looking at my seedling. I did not put the water can down. I want that noted. I stood in my own gateway holding a water can like an idiot, because putting a thing down is a movement, and I had just been informed by my entire nervous system that movements were currently expensive. She turned her head. She looked at me for about 2 seconds, and then she said, "Foundation establishment, mid-stage." Not a question, not an accusation. The tone you would use to read a price off a tag. I want to explain, very precisely, why that sentence nearly stopped my heart. The Hongmeng Heart Sutra's concealment is not decorative. It hides you from divine sense. It hides you from spiritual pressure. It hides you from every scanning technique in this sect, and I had spent a full month testing it against people I knew could see through most things. A Golden Core supervisor at the mining registry, a law enforcement hall inspector at a checkpoint, Wang Chen himself, twice, at conversational range. It held, every time. It held perfectly, and she had not scanned me at all. I would have felt a scan. She had watched a man walk through a gate carrying a water can and read his cultivation off the way he was breathing. So I went to the floor. "Senior," She had already turned away. She was looking at the flower again, and she reached out and touched one of the leaves with the back of a finger, checking something, the way you check whether a pot is hot. Mine, she said, and there it was, the last piece. Not Elder Lin Shui. Lin Shui had been the delivery. Somebody had put a seed into the hands of the acting sect leader of an entire sect and told her where to walk it, and that somebody was standing 8 feet away from me in my vegetable patch. I want to be honest. At that point, I still did not know she was the sect leader. I had not made the connection to the woman with the sword either, not properly. The smell was the same, but I had a lot of theories and not much appetite for testing them. What I knew was, this person is above Elder Lin Shui, and Elder Lin Shui is above everything I have ever been in a room with. So I did the only sensible thing, which was to try to look at her. Appraisal. I have used that ability, at time of telling, something like 3,000 times. It has read God's leavings. It has read a doom bead that could unmake the southern half of the world. It has read the private intentions of a man who had spent his entire future planning to kill me. It looked at the woman standing in my courtyard and came back with this. Question marks. That is all. 3 of them. The divine ability that reads the truth of anything on this earth put up its hands. I have never told anybody that, not one person, in 9 years. I am telling you. She stayed for perhaps 20 minutes, and she spent almost all of it looking at the plant, which I would like to note was, at that stage, a sprout the length of my finger. Then she took 2 things out and set them on my table. The first was a formation diagram. Spirit gathering, 3 layers, and it was drawn in a hand I did not recognize on paper that had not been made in this province. The second was a book with no title, no sect mark, no author, no colophon. Just a cover and 140 pages. If the flower dies, she said, so do you. And then, on her way past me, without turning her head, she added the sentence that reordered the next decade of my life. Never tell anyone I exist. She was gone before I finished bowing. I sat down on the ground of my own courtyard for a while, with the water can still in my hand. I read the nameless manual that night, and I want to tell you what it is because it explains why I am alive, and it explains what kind of person hands a thing like that to a gardener. It is a concealment art, but it is not the kind that hides your cultivation. I already had that. It is the kind that hides everything else. Breathing pattern, blood flow, the rate at which spiritual energy bends around a body, the tells in the eyes when a man is calculating, the extension of the spirit when a man is listening harder than he is admitting to, the microscopic wrongness that a strong cultivator feels in a room before he knows why he feels it. Every single one of the things she had just used to read me in 2 seconds off a water can. She had caught me with a tool, and then she had put the tool on my table and left. I have had 9 years to decide whether that was generosity or bookkeeping, and I have not decided. I lean toward bookkeeping. A trap that gets noticed is a wasted trap, and I was her trap. But I have also lain awake and thought about the fact that she did not have to. She could have simply told me to be less obvious. She could have done nothing and let me be found in 6 months and put a new seed in a new shack in front of a new gardener. She gave me the manual that makes me unfindable by anyone except her. I studied it until sunrise, and then I studied it for 4 more months. And by the end of it, a thing had happened that I did not fully register until much later. I had become invisible, not hidden, invisible. From that autumn onward, the number of people on this earth who could look at Chen Guang and see what he actually was dropped to 1. And she visits 3 or 4 times a year. Now let me tell you about the market and about a boy called Fan Yu, because this is where I found out the difference between being poor and being helpless, and they are not the same thing at all. I had finished a run of talismans, 6 weeks of work, healing charms mostly, which are the bread of the trade, plus a stack of 10,000 sword talismans that I was genuinely proud of because they had a 9 in 10 success rate, and mine had been running about 4 in 10 in the spring. Call it 60 spirit stones of stock. Which does not sound like much, and which was, at that moment, the difference between clearing my fine and not. I took it down to the sect market on an ordinary afternoon. The market is a long open lane with stalls on both sides, and the arrangement is entirely by force. Golden core cultivators at the good end, near the shade, foundation establishment in the middle, outer sect and chi refining at the far end, near the drains. I set up near the drains and did well, better than well. I had sold about half of it in 2 hours, and I was counting, which is how he found me. Counting attracts attention. I have never done it in public since. Fan Yu was Heavenly Joy Pavilion, same branch as Mei Lan, 16, maybe 17. Foundation establishment, late stage, on a golden core track, from a family with money, wearing more spirit stones as decoration on his belt than I had earned in my entire life. He crouched down at my stall and looked through my stock with genuine interest, which, let me be fair about, he had a good eye. He picked out the best sheets. He knew what he was looking at. Then he put the entire stock in his sleeve, all of it, the half I had left and the coin box. And he stood up. I'll pay you tomorrow, he said. I looked up at him from the ground. And he smiled and offered me the alternative, which is the part, hear properly, because it is the most Heavenly Joy Pavilion sentence ever constructed. Or you can come with me to the pavilion and collect it in person. That is not a joke. That is a real, live offer, delivered in daylight, to the man who put a dagger in their senior sister's neck 4 months earlier. I looked around the market. There were 40 or 50 people within 20 feet of us. Every single one of them was looking somewhere else. A man 3 feet to my left was inspecting a sword he had already inspected twice while I was setting up. 2 women at the next stall had found something fascinating about the sky. An outer sect boy of about 14 was staring at the ground with the specific rigidity of someone who has decided not to be a witness. Nobody moved. Nobody was ever going to move. That is the actual rule of this place, not the written ones. The strong take, and the crowd studies its shoes, and everybody agrees afterward that it was unfortunate. So I said, "Of course, senior brother," and I bowed. Properly, with both hands, the full one, and I packed up my empty stall and went home. I would like to describe what I did for the next 6 hours because I have thought about it a great deal and I am not proud of the accuracy. I did not rage. I did not pace. I found out his shift. It is not difficult. Every disciple in this sect has a rotation and the rotations are posted. And a boy who has just acquired 60 stones of merchandise wants to be somewhere he can sell it. Which means the market again, which means the upper path, which means one particular stretch of switchback between the pavilion and the ridge where the trees come close on both sides. Then I waited until the light was gone. I'll be precise about what happened next because it is the first time I did it deliberately and it set the shape of every single thing I have done since. I did not challenge him. I did not step out into the road. I did not say anything at all about talismans. I hit him from behind, in the dark, with everything. Full concealment, purple chi damped down to nothing. He had a sensory range of about 40 feet, and I was inside it for 11 seconds before I moved, standing still behind a tree, breathing the way the nameless manual says to breathe, which is not really breathing. The dagger went in under the jaw at an angle, and he got a hand up faster than I expected, and I want to give him that, because he was better than I had assumed. He got a hand up and got a defensive technique half-formed, so I put 3 spirit swords through the hand and pinned him to a tree by both shoulders. He was terrified. He was also, I want to note, extremely confused, because in the model of the universe he had been operating under for 17 years, the gardener was scenery, and scenery does not do this. He tried to buy his way out. Of course he did. He was very generous about it near the end. He offered me considerably more than 60 stones. I took my talismans back out of his sleeve and I counted 60 stones off his belt, which was approximately what he owed me, and I left the rest. I want to explain that because it looks like restraint and it is not. A robbery has a motive. A man found dead and stripped is a man somebody wanted money from, and the law enforcement hall investigates money. A man found dead with his purse full is a man somebody wanted dead, and the list of people who want a Heavenly Joy Pavilion disciple dead is 400 names long. Then I left 3 cheap spirit swords in the body. Not my dagger, not anything traceable. 3 market-grade swords, the kind sold by the crate at the drain end of the lane, of a make owned by roughly 1,000 people in this sect, and I walked home. I did not say anything clever to him. I have gone back over it many times and I cannot come up with anything I would have wanted to say. He was not a mastermind. He was a boy who took things, because taking things had worked every single time he had ever tried it. And the last time he tried it, the arithmetic came out differently. Wang Chen came around 4 days later. He sat in my courtyard, on my stool, and drank my tea and admired my fence again, and told me that a Heavenly Joy Pavilion disciple had been found on the upper switchback full of budget cutlery. Wasn't that interesting? And where had I been? Making talismans, I said. He nodded. He looked at the talismans on my table, which were real, and which I had made specifically so they would be there. And then he did not ask me anything else at all. Instead, he told me a story. He said that some years ago, a report had gone up to the sect leader. This is 60 years into her seclusion, so nobody has any idea how a report gets to her, or why he thinks it did, about a rising genius in a rival sect. A young man of extraordinary talent projected to be a serious threat within 30 years. The report contained several proposals for managing him, and the answer that came back was one line. Can any genius be as powerful as me? Kill him. Then Wang Chen laughed and finished my tea and stood up and closed the case. I have spent years going back and forth on why. The 2 candidates are that a real investigation would have generated paperwork and he was avoiding paperwork, or that he found the situation entertaining and wanted it to continue. The evidence, accumulated over a decade, points overwhelmingly at entertainment. He also, on his way out, told me about the lawless tower. Let me explain it here because it is going to matter enormously, and because the way he explained it was the most frightening thing anybody had said to me up to that point in my life, and he said it while brushing off his sleeve. The lawless tower is 5 floors. It stands on our mountain, and it is the reason the spiritual energy in the surrounding hills is as good as it is, because it processes what it takes and puts it into the ground. What it takes is cultivation. Not quickly, slowly, continuously, every hour of every day. A prisoner on the 5th floor is losing realm the way a wet cloth loses water, and when he has fallen far enough, he goes to the 4th floor, and the process continues. And at the bottom of it is the mining field with a pickaxe, and however many centuries you have left, you cannot break out. Nobody ever has. You cannot kill yourself. It does not permit it. You simply get smaller. That's where you'd go, Wang Chen said cheerfully at my gate. If it were ever a fellow disability, I mean. Not for a pavilion boy. Nobody's putting a good disciple in a tower over a pavilion boy. Then he waved and walked off down the road. I would like it noted that I understood at that exact moment that I had just been given both a warning and a permission slip by the same man in the same sentence, and that he had enjoyed constructing it. Two things landed that month that changed my position. The first was armor. Elder Lin Shu passed it down through my master, without ceremony, without explanation, in the same manner as everything else that has ever come into my life. Gao Lei handed me a wrapped bundle and told me to go back to work. I appraised it the next morning. One shoulder guard from the 9 Heavens battle armor. Defends against most golden core attacks. Part of a set. Part of a set. I spent the next 4 years quietly obsessed with that phrase. A set is 9 pieces. I currently have 4. The rate at which they arrive is entirely outside my control, and it appears to correlate with how useful I have recently been to a woman who has never once mentioned the armor to me. The second thing was clear mind. That is what the purple bubble from the pure yang flower had been saving up for, and it completed that spring. Divine ability. Clear mind. The sensation is ice water poured through the inside of your skull. Comprehension goes up. Learning speed goes up. Things that were opaque become merely difficult, and things that were merely difficult become obvious. My talisman success rate went from 4 in 10 to 8 in 10 in a fortnight. That is not a small thing. That is my income doubling, and my income was the fence between me and a branch master with a grudge. I paid the fine 11 days early. I want to describe handing it over, because it was one of the few genuinely satisfying moments of my early 20s. I carried 1,000 spirit stones up to Law Enforcement Peak in a sack, because I did not own a storage artifact yet, and I put it in Wang Chen's hands, and I stood there while he counted it. He counted the whole thing, slowly. And when he had finished, he looked up at me with an expression I have seen on him perhaps 4 times in 10 years, and it was disappointment. Genuine, undisguised disappointment. He had been looking forward to what I was going to do when I could not pay. Sorry to ruin it. Around then, I met the man who has spent the last decade convinced that I am personally and specifically cheating him, and I'll introduce him properly because I am fond of him and he would find that unbearable. Li Chang, emotion-severing cliff, same branch as me, which means we are technically brothers in the same lineage, which he takes extremely seriously and which I had never once thought about before he brought it up. He was 18, true disciple, which is 3 full tiers above what I was pretending to be, top-tier talent, blessed by the spirits of the mountains and rivers, which is a real thing that happens to about 1 person a generation, and which means the local land itself has decided to be on your side. He is the disciple the branch points at when outsiders visit. He walked up to me in the spirit herb garden while I was staking tomatoes, which I want on the record. He said, "Senior brother, I intend to surpass you." I put down the stake. "I've been told you were the first in our generation to reach foundation establishment," he said. "I was second. I intend to be first at everything after that, and I'd like to challenge you formally so that when I do it, it's recorded. Understand the framing here. On paper, I was a foundation establishment gardener from the outer section with a criminal record and a recently paid fine. He was a genius. Him challenging me was like a racehorse formally challenging a fence post and then asking the fence post to sign something. He was completely sincere. That is the thing about Li Qiang that took me years to properly appreciate. There is no irony anywhere in that man. Not a trace. He looked me in the eye with total conviction and told me he was going to work harder than me and beat me, and could we please schedule it? I said, "Junior brother is exceptionally talented. I would never underestimate him." He nodded, satisfied, and left. That exchange, in almost exactly that form, is going to happen about 6 more times over the next 10 years. I would like you to keep score, because I have. Then the sect posted a mission, and the mission was the demon cave. 5 disciples. Clear out the demon population. Standard rotation work, the kind of thing every branch sends people on twice a year, moderately dangerous and well paid. I read the roster. 2 of the 5 were Heavenly Joy Pavilion. Yue. Ding Long. I stood in front of that board for a long time. Let me be fair to the Heavenly Sound Sex Administration because I have thought about this and I do not believe anyone in the assignment office was bribed. There is no rule against it. Branches are mixed on missions deliberately to build cohesion, and the 2 pavilion names on that list were both perfectly ordinary candidates for the work. But here is the architecture. Fellow disciples cannot be killed inside the sect. The law enforcement hall investigates every single death, and it has a mirror that sees the past, and nobody has ever escaped it. The demon cave is not inside the sect. The demon cave is a hole in the ground full of monsters where the standard casualty rate is 1 in 5, where bodies are routinely not recovered, and where the phrase, "he was separated from the group," is written on so many reports that it has its own line on the form. They were not sending me on a mission. They were mailing me somewhere with a return address. The other 2 on the list were Zhang Wei from Ice Moon Valley and Kai Ru from Leihuo Peak, and both of them hate the Heavenly Joy Pavilion for reasons that predate me. That is the only reason I did not simply run. I did not refuse. Refusing a sect mission gets you a slower version of the same outcome, delivered by the sect instead of by strangers. Instead, I went to my master. I stood in Gao Lei's courtyard, and I said that I had been assigned to the Demon Cave with 2 Heavenly Joy Pavilion disciples, and that I would like to learn something before I went. He looked at me with his shut-door face for about 11 seconds. Then Then he taught me demonic sound slash. It is a branch technique, sound-based, mid-tier, the sort of thing a competent disciple takes a month to internalize and 3 months to make reliable. It is not a secret, and it is not a treasure. It is simply the correct tool for a man who needs to kill something in the next 4 weeks. He did not ask why I thought I would be in danger. He did not offer to have the roster changed, which he could have done and which would have been a public statement that his disciple needed protecting. He taught me a killing technique and told me to go back to work. I have been trying to work out that man for 10 years. Clear mind got me there in 7 days. Then I took every spirit stone I had, 720 of them, the entire remainder of my life's savings after the fine, and I bought a blade. The Shadow Blade, golden core grade, dark iron, absurdly good for the price because the seller was leaving the sect and needed the money faster than he needed the value. Let me note that I was, at that moment, completely broke, holding a weapon, about to walk into a cave with 2 people assigned to kill me. Financial planning has never been among my talents. The night before we left, Fairy Mingyi appeared at my fence. She did not ask about drainage this time. She handed me a folded note and said that she had heard I was going to the demon cave and that the cave was dangerous and that she hoped I would be careful. The note listed all 4 of my teammates, cultivation, techniques, preferred openings, known weaknesses. Ding Long's compass, Yue's formation, Zhang Wei's tendency to disengage early. It was better intelligence than the law enforcement hall would have given me. I have never worked out whether that was help or a wager. She is still here. She is still smiling. She has still never once mentioned the flower. The cave took a month. I'll describe the actual experience of it because everybody imagines a horror, and it was mostly a job. Demons in the outer layers are Foundation establishment grade, stupid, aggressive, and numerous. They come in waves along the tunnels. You form a line, you hold, you clear, you advance 40 feet, you rest, you do it again. It is closer to farm work than to war, except that demons drop bubbles when they die and nobody else can see them. So every fight was exercise with a wage attached, white bubbles mostly, and green ones, and every 4th or 5th day a blue. By the end of the first 3 weeks, my chi blood was at 95 and my cultivation at 96, and I was hoarding it, feeding it, spending nothing, because Foundation establishment perfection is not a thing you do in front of 4 witnesses. Ding Long spent that month stealing my kills, openly. Not subtly, not deniably. He would step in front of me at the exact moment a demon broke and take the last strike, and then he would look back over his shoulder at me with a small smile and do it again 90 seconds later. He did it perhaps 40 times. The purpose was not the kill credit. The purpose was to find out how much I would swallow, and specifically whether I would swallow it in front of an audience. Because a man who complains in a cave is a man who can be provoked into moving first, and a man who moves first in a cave has attacked a fellow disciple. I swallowed all of it, every single time, for a month. I thanked him twice. Then, in the 4th week, the group split. That is standard. The tunnels branch 4 ways at the second junction, and you cover more ground in pairs or singly. Let me tell you what Zhang Wei said to Kai Ru at that junction, quietly, when he thought I was out of range and I was not, because it is the single most honest assessment of my situation that anyone gave me that year. He said, "He's dead. Don't be near it when it happens." He was not being cruel. He was being accurate. He had watched the same month I had. And then everybody walked off down their tunnel, and I ran. Not out, deeper, at full speed, faster than I had let anybody see me move in 4 years, straight down the left branch, past the map section, past the point where the wave density drops off because the demons do not like the cold down there either. And 2 miles in a chamber with a dead tree growing out of a crack in the floor, I climbed inside the trunk and I burned both bars. The calculation, because it was not brave, it was arithmetic. A breakthrough takes 6 hours. During those 6 hours, I am completely defenseless, but afterwards, I am Foundation Establishment Perfection, which is a full grade above both of them, and the entire month had been Ding Long testing whether I would break, which meant he was not ready yet, which meant I had a window. 6 hours of total vulnerability against the rest of my life. I got about 5.5. I heard the tree split while my eyes were still closed. Ding Long had a tracking compass. It was on Mingyi's note. I knew he had it. I had assumed 2 miles and a rock ceiling would be enough, and it was not, and that assumption is the closest I have ever come to dying. He put a broadsword through the trunk on a line that would have taken my head off at the jaw. It hit the 9 heavens shoulder guard. I want to describe this precisely. The sword did not stop. It slowed. It went through the wood and it hit the guard, and the guard did what it was built to do, which is refuse a golden core strike, and the whole force of it went sideways through my shoulder and into the tree. And my eyes opened at Foundation Establishment Perfection, about 8 inches from the face of a man who had just discovered that his ambush had worked perfectly and his sword had not. I have thought about the expression on his face many times. He had a full second to change plans, and he used it to try the same thing again. Yue came in behind him, Foundation Establishment Perfection herself, which meant she was my equal on paper and better than me in practice, because she had been at Perfection for 2 years, and I had been at it for 11 seconds. 2 on 1. Here is how it went. Ding Long pulled back for the second swing, and I flicked the flat of his broadsword with one finger, and the blade snapped 6 inches above the guard. That is what purple chi does. It is not extra strength. It changes what a thing is willing to break. He was still looking at the stump of his own sword when I put my palm through his chest, and everything behind it stopped being organized. Yue got much further because she was much better. She had a formation up before Ding Long finished falling. A real one, layered, the sort of thing that takes 6 years to learn and 11 seconds to deploy. And inside it, she was faster than me and better positioned than me, and she got one genuine strike in, high on the ribs, that I felt for the next 4 days. So I stopped trying to fight her inside her own formation, and I used demonic sound slash. Sound does not care about geometry. The slash went through the array wall the way a shout goes through a curtain, and the array came apart, and while it was coming apart, the purple chi went through her. And then, because I had been at Foundation Establishment Perfection for approximately 4 minutes, and I was not going to gamble on anything at all, I stood over both bodies and burned 10,000 sword talismans into them. 10. All of them. 6 weeks of work and my entire remaining stock into 2 corpses in a hole in the ground, until there was nothing left with a name or a face or a cultivation base attached. I want to defend that because it looks like panic, and it was policy. A Foundation Establishment Perfection cultivator with an intact body can be revived by an immortal sect with sufficient motivation. A Heavenly Joy Pavilion disciple who died on assignment is a name on a report. A Heavenly Joy Pavilion disciple who died on assignment and whose remains contain a legible cultivation signature is a witness. Then I coughed blood for a while, sitting against the split tree, because perfection or not, that fight had cost me more than I had. And then 5 demons wandered into the chamber, drawn by the noise. I had no talismans. I had a broken shoulder guard, a shadow blade, and about 1/3 of my chi. It took 40 minutes, and I do not particularly want to describe it. I walked out of that cave alone 8 days later. Zhang Wei and Sai Ru were at the mouth, waiting, because the mission does not close until everyone reports. I'll describe their faces because it is the moment I understood what I had become in the eyes of the sect, and I had not chosen it. They saw me coming up the slope, and both of them went white. They did not ask. That is the part. Nobody asked me a single question, then or ever. They did the arithmetic that everybody in this sect does automatically. 5 went in, 3 came out. The 2 missing are Heavenly Joy Pavilion. The survivor is the man the Heavenly Joy Pavilion has a grudge against. Zhang Wei bowed to me, formally. He had not bowed to me once in the previous month. Then they left, very quickly and very politely, and I turned in the mission. Wang Chen came the next week with 300 spirit stones and a list of questions. I lied to him in a straight line for 20 minutes, where the group split, which tunnel I took, when I last saw them, whether I had heard anything. He wrote it all down. I appraised him at dawn the following morning because I had to know how bad it was. Wang Chen, vast heaven sect, true disciple, born with the dragon's fury, undercover in law enforcement peak. He strongly suspects you killed all 3 and has developed a deep interest in you. 3. Not 2. He was already counting Fan Yu. I sat with that number for a long time, in my cabin, with 300 spirit stones on the table and a plant outside that had put on 4 new leaves while I was underground. And what I concluded was this. The most dangerous man in my life had just decided I was interesting, and there was no version of the next 10 years in which he stopped watching, and the only thing I could do about it was be worth watching in ways that did not get me killed. I have been performing for that man for a decade. He has no idea, and keep it that way. And I would like it noted that he thinks he is the one running the observation. I got back to the cliff to find Li Chang waiting at my gate. Foundation establishment, mid-stage now. He had gone up while I was underground, which he mentioned immediately, and he wanted his spar. You've been away 6 weeks, he said. I've reached mid-stage. You're at late stage. That's the closest the gap has ever been, and it will not be this close again. So I would like to do it now, before I pass you and it stops meaning anything. I want to point out that this is, structurally, an extremely fair-minded thing to say. He was not trying to catch me weak. He was explaining out loud that he wanted the record to show a real contest. I said I would need a few days, which was true because I had a broken shoulder guard and cracked ribs, and I was, in the sex records, a Foundation Establishment late-stage disciple who was actually at perfection, and the entire problem in front of me was how to lose convincingly. That is not a joke. That was a genuine tactical problem, and I spent 2 days on it. If I lose badly, that is fine and normal, and nobody looks twice. Except that a man who has just come out of the demon cave alone, minus 2 Heavenly Joy Pavilion disciples, and who then loses limply to his own branch's true disciple, is a man who is obviously performing, and there is exactly one person in this sect who is looking for that specific shape. If I win, I am a gardener who beat a genius, and every eye on the mountain turns. I had settled on losing in the 4th exchange, credibly, with a real technique, when I walked into my courtyard and found a woman under my tree. She was sitting. She had made tea using my leaves, which I did not comment on. You're planning to lose, she said. Not a question again. She has never once asked me a question that she did not already have the answer to, and I have come to understand that the questions are not for information. They are for watching what I do with them. Junior is at a disadvantage against a true disciple, I said. She looked at me over the cup. Let me describe the silence that followed, because I have been on the receiving end of a lot of silences from that woman, and they are all different, and this one was contempt. Then she said, "If you beat him, I will give you a blade art," and she put a book on my table, 7 Styles of the Heavenly Blade. I have seen a great many cultivation manuals since. I have had access, through the Whispering Slate, to a man who appears to know every technique that has ever existed. I have described that book to him obliquely, twice. There is no author, there is no lineage mark, there is no sect it belongs to. Style 1 is Moonslash, Style 2 is Mountain Suppressing, Style 3 is Meteor. There are 7, and I have 4 of them at time of telling, and the 5th is currently beyond me. I have never met one single person who has heard of it. I said thank you, and I bowed, and I did not touch the book while she was in the courtyard, because there is a way of grabbing at things that tells the giver what you are. She finished her tea, she stood up, and on her way out, without breaking stride and without any comment whatsoever, she took my shadow blade off the table by the door. 720 spirit stones, my entire savings after the fine. The weapon I had bought specifically to survive an assassination attempt, which had in fact just survived an assassination attempt, and which had blood on the grip that I had not finished cleaning off. Gone, under her arm. No comment, not even a glance at me. I stood in my own yard for a while. I'll log that formally as theft number 1 because there are going to be several more, and I would like the record to be complete, and I would like it to be understood that I have never once been given a reason. The spar happened 4 days later. It was public because Li Qiang had registered it, because he registers everything. Perhaps 60 people came. The whole outer section, some of the inner disciples, and 2 of the branch's actual seniors, who came because Li Qiang is the branch's investment, and they like to watch the investment work. He opened with Heavenly Thunder Sword. That is not a beginner's technique. That is a genuine, high-tier branch art that a normal disciple learns at Golden Core, and he had it at Foundation Establishment mid-stage, and it came off the ground in a line that cracked the flagstones. It was, I want to be clear, a beautiful opening. If I had been what I was pretending to be, it would have ended the contest right there. I ended it with 1 demonic sound slash. Not 4 exchanges, 1. I want to explain what went wrong with my plan, because the plan had been good. He came in with the thunder, and I put up the sound slash to blunt it and take a controlled hit, which was the entire design. Absorb, stagger, lose the 3rd exchange, bow. And the slash went straight through the technique, Purple Chi. I had switched to the Hongmeng Heart Sutra 4 months earlier, and I had not once used it against a real opponent under real pressure, and I had badly underestimated it. His technique came apart in the air. My slash kept going. It hit him in the chest and put him 12 feet backwards into the flagstones, and his sword went end over end and stuck in the ground about a third of the way to the fence. Total elapsed time, from his opening to his sword landing, under 2 seconds. The silence afterward was excellent. 60 people had come to watch a true disciple demonstrate on a gardener, and the gardener had ended it before most of them had finished sitting down. Li Qiang got up. That is the first thing he did, and he did it fast. And let me give him full credit for it, because I have seen a lot of people take a public loss, and most of them stay down a beat longer than they need to, for the sympathy. He picked up his sword, he walked back, and he asked me, in front of everyone, how. And I said, I had a lucky encounter in the demon cave. I appraised him afterward, because I was curious, and because he had done nothing to deserve what I had just done to him. He was resentful, which is fair, but it was not the loss, it was the word, luck. He hated it with a purity that I found genuinely moving. Not because he thought I was lying, he had no reason to think that. Because in his model of the world, luck is the thing that lets undeserving people pass deserving ones, and he had just watched it happen to him in public. Sorry, junior brother. Sincerely. I'm going to say that word to you about 6 more times over the next 10 years, and every single one of them is going to be a lie. Now, Zhao Wen, and what people will actually spend to hurt you. He appeared at the Spirit Herb Garden about 3 weeks later, on an ordinary morning, in an ordinary robe. Golden Core early stage. Unremarkable face. He said he was from Hengliu Waterfall and had been sent to collect an order of heartbreak grass, and the order existed and the paperwork was correct, and he thanked me and left. There was no reason at all to appraise him. I appraised him because I appraise everybody who comes to that garden, every single day, and I have done so for 10 years, and it is the single most boring discipline in my life, and it has saved me 4 times. Zhao Wen. Luosha Sect, undercover. Broke through to Golden Core early stage specifically in order to avenge Mei Lan. Willing to die doing it. I'll walk through that because it is where I finally understood what a natural charm physique actually does to a region. He was a Golden Core cultivator from a genuine immortal sect. He had 300 years of life ahead of him. He had a career, a lineage, a place, and he had spent a breakthrough, a real one, resource burning, the kind that takes a decade of preparation and gets you 1 attempt, and then buried himself in a hostile demonic sect under a false identity, with no extraction plan on what was unambiguously a one-way trip. For a woman who had been dead 4 months. For a woman who, as far as I could ever determine, he had spoken to perhaps 6 times. I sat with that a long while. I still sit with it. Because Meilong did not do anything to him. That is the part. She did not seduce him. She did not manipulate him. She almost certainly did not think about him at all. Her physique simply existed in his vicinity a handful of times, and it wrote something into him that outlived her by 4 months and cost him everything he had. And there were, at that time, somewhere between 6 and 30 men in this region carrying the same thing with my name attached to it. I reported him to Wang Chen. I want to justify that because it looks like cowardice. It was efficiency. The law enforcement hall exists. It is very good at what it does, and a golden core infiltrator from an immortal sect is precisely their business and precisely not mine. They raided him 7 days later. He escaped, and he came for me that night anyway, which was the same night my bars hit 100. I would like to describe the timing because it remains the funniest thing that has ever happened to me. I was mid-breakthrough, golden core, 20 years old, purple chi wrapped around me in layers like silk on a cocoon, my meridians being torn out and rebuilt simultaneously, completely and totally defenseless for approximately 6 hours. And the man who had spent his entire future on killing me selected that exact window to walk up my road. He arrived about 90 seconds after I opened my eyes. 90 seconds. Golden core, at 20. Publicly, foundation establishment late stage. He was confident, and he had earned the confidence. He had watched me for a week. He had checked with the registry. Every single thing he had seen, said Gardner, and the last verified report on my cultivation was 4 months old and wrong by 2 full grades. He came through the gate without hiding because there was nothing in the yard worth hiding from. I let him get to about 12 feet, and then I said her name. Meilong. He stopped. Why I did that? Because it looks like cruelty, and it was engineering. A man who has just heard the name of the woman he came to avenge is a man whose attention has gone, for about 1/4 of a second, somewhere that is not his hands. That is the entire margin I needed. Moon slash. First style of the heavenly blade. The first time I had ever used it on a person. It is called moon slash because of what it looks like, which is a curve of white light about the length of a man, and it does not so much cut as arrive. He did not get a second exchange. I stood in my courtyard afterward for a while, and I want to say something serious here, and then I will go back to being funny, because this is the last quiet moment before the part of my life where things stop being local. I killed 4 people in my first year at Foundation Establishment. A woman who was going to frame me. A boy who robbed me in daylight. 2 people who were sent into a hole in the ground with me, and a man who loved somebody I killed. Not one of them was a monster. Every single one of them was an ordinary person doing the completely normal thing that their position in this world allowed them to do. Meilong needed a scapegoat, and I was a scapegoat-shaped object. Fan Yu took things because taking things had always worked. Ding Long was given an assignment and carried it out competently. Zhao Wen was in love. That is the sect. That is the whole sect, top to bottom. Nobody here is evil. Everybody here is simply standing on whatever is beneath them, because that is where the floor is, and the floor does not have opinions. And I decided, standing over Zhao Wen at 20 years old with purple chi still coming off my hands, that I was going to keep climbing until there was nobody standing on me, and that I was going to do the entire thing without one single person on this mountain ever finding out that I could. 10 years, watering plants. Let us go. The rabbit arrived that spring, and I need to set this up properly because he is going to be load-bearing from here on, and I want it understood that I did not choose him. Tianqing Mountain, one of the neighboring sects, and specifically the one whose cultivators had ambushed Song Ling mid-breakthrough, had a spy in our sect. Not a person, a beast, an e-beast. Common grade, unremarkable, the kind of small animal that wanders around a spirit herb garden eating things and occasionally sitting in the sun. That is the entire point of it. Nobody looks at a rabbit. I looked at a rabbit. Let me be clear that this was not insight. I appraise one thing every single day, and I had already done the garden, the seedling, and the fence that week, and it was a slow Tuesday. The appraisal came back with Spy Beast, Tianqing Mountain, currently reporting on this branch's activity. And then, underneath, the part that reorganized my finances for the next decade. Enormous concealed potential. Deceit Beast bloodline, sealed, can be unsealed by feeding it spirit stones daily. So I caught it and I hung it from a roof beam. Not as punishment, as a feeding mechanism, because a beast that can move is a beast that can leave. Day 1, the price was 100 spirit stones. He ate them, all of them, in one sitting with visible enjoyment in under a minute. And then he asked what was for dinner. Let me be clear about how much money that is. 100 spirit stones is 10 months of an outer disciple's stipend. It is 5 healing talismans at retail. It was, at that point in my life, a serious purchase. He ate it as a snack, hanging upside down from a beam, and then asked for more. The next morning, there was a golden bubble floating over him. Not white, not green, not blue, not purple, not even purple gold. Gold. Golden legend, 1 of 2. I did not know what that meant. I still did not know what it meant 3 years later when it finally completed, and when it did complete, it gave me something I could not have bought with every stone I have ever earned. So I paid. And the price went up. That is how the bloodline works. Every tier it climbs, the daily cost rises. 100 a day became 200 a day, became 490 a day, and the final stretch was 490 a day for 81 consecutive days, which is 39,690 spirit stones. I would like the audience to understand that I have been financially ruined by a rabbit, and within roughly 2 days of being hung from a beam and force-fed currency, he decided that he worked for me. I do not know how that happened. There was no negotiation. I hung him up, I paid his ransom to himself, and he concluded that this made us family. He started calling me master. He started referring to himself out loud in the third person as Lord Rabbit, and he developed the single most infuriating and most useful verbal tick I have ever encountered in a living creature. All my friends on the Tao give Lord Rabbit face. That is his answer to everything. Can you get into that building? Friends on the Tao. Do you know that, senior brother? Friends on the Tao give Lord Rabbit face. Is this dangerous? Master, all my friends on the Tao know Lord Rabbit is honest and never lies. He says it perhaps 40 times a week. He has said it to me while hanging from a beam being force-fed. He has said it to me with a swollen face. He said it to a Golden Core supervisor once, out loud, in front of me, and the supervisor laughed and gave him a fruit, which he presented to me afterward as proof. And the genuinely infuriating part, I want this properly on the record, is that it is frequently true. He has a bloodline built entirely out of deception, not illusion, deception. He is not hiding, he is being overlooked, at a level that appears to work on formations. He can walk into places I cannot walk into. He knows things that are not written down. He gets away with an amount of behavior that would have gotten a human disciple thrown into the lawless tower 9 separate times. Something like half of my intelligence over the next 10 years comes out of that animal. He also needs a collar. A spirit beast's power has to be suppressed or the entire mountain notices, and the collars are graded, and they are not cheap. Chi refining collar, about 100 stones. Foundation establishment collar, considerably more. Golden core collar, 2,850. He wears it around his neck. He also wears it around his waist sometimes, for reasons of style. He has, on at least 4 occasions, taken it off and held it up as a weapon. So my monthly expenses at 20 years old were 1 flower, free, 1 rabbit, more than a house, and 1 blade, which keeps getting stolen. Let me deal with the thefts now, because they accumulate. Song Ling does not visit often. 3 or 4 times a year, sometimes only once, always without warning, always by simply being in my courtyard when I come home, and every single time, she takes my knife. The shadow blade went first, as described. I replaced it with something I could actually afford, a mid-grade curved blade with a moon-shaped fitting, and I called it Half Moon, and Half Moon lasted about 7 months. So I bought Half Moon the second. That one lasted longer, nearly 2 years, long enough that I stopped bracing for it, which is presumably the point. And then one evening I came home, and the corner by the door where I keep it was empty, and there was a faint smell of flowers, and the rabbit was outside with a face like a dropped melon. She has never mentioned it, not once. There is no acknowledgement, no comment, no explanation. She has never said the words, "I am taking your knife." She simply leaves, and the knife leaves with her, and I stand in an empty courtyard doing arithmetic. By the time we reach the end of this story, I will be on Half Moon the 4th, and I will have stopped buying expensive ones, and I would like it noted that this is not resignation, this is budgeting. And then there is the tea. I made her tea the first time because she sat down at my table and looked at the pot. Snow after spring, 55 spirit stones a Qian. That is a perfectly respectable working man's luxury. That is what a foundation establishment disciple with steady income drinks when he wants to feel successful. Second visit, she mentioned that it was thin, so I bought Hongshu fragrance, 100. She did not comment on that one, which I took as approval and which I now understand was patience. Then, some months later, Hua Qianshu, 200 spirit stones per Qian, and a Qian is not very much tea. That is a genuinely serious purchase. That is a week's income for a golden core disciple. And then, one afternoon, in exactly the same tone she uses for everything, she mentioned Tianqing red. 10,000 spirit stones per Qian. I laughed, out loud, before I could stop it. She looked at me. I have been buying tea futures ever since. I have restructured my entire income around a beverage. There is a specific and permanent line in my mental accounts labeled tea, and it is larger than the line labeled weapons, and it is larger than the line labeled armor, and for 3 of the last 9 years, it was larger than the line labeled food. And here's the part I have come to genuinely rely on. Every single time she appears, before I see her, before I smell the flowers, before anything at all, there is a sound from outside, a soft, wet impact, like a sack of grain hitting a wall. That is the rabbit. She hits him, every time, on sight, without provocation, without comment, and without any apparent reason. He does nothing. He has never done anything. He is simply present in the yard, being a rabbit, and she flicks a finger while walking past, and he goes across the courtyard with his face already swelling. He has never understood why. He has developed theories. His current theory, which he has held for 6 years, is that it is a compliment, and that she is the only person on the mountain who recognizes his true stature. And I have come to rely on it completely, because in 9 years that sound has never once been wrong. Rabbit goes flying. She is here. Now let me talk about money, and about the place in this sect where you can dig your way to power. The mining field. It sits on top of an ancient battlefield. Nobody knows whose. There are remnant souls down there, and legacies and weapons and things that people have started wars over. And above all of it, for the first 200 feet, there is ordinary rock full of ordinary ore. And ore, when you break it, gives bubbles. I found that out by accident, on a work rotation, in my 3rd week at Golden Core, when a supervisor put me on a hauling detail and somebody handed me a pick. Roughly 20 blue bubbles a day if you swing hard for 12 hours. 20 a day. The flower gives 2. Extremely clear about what happened to my life at that point, because I know exactly how it sounds. I located the single most efficient method of advancement available to me in the entire world. And the method was manual labor. Not a secret realm, not a legacy, not a master's guidance, not a bloodline, not a heaven-sent opportunity in a cave. A pickaxe, 12 hours, every day. I went down there and I hit rocks for months. I took the worst shifts, because the worst shifts have the fewest witnesses. I got a reputation among the mining registry as a quiet, tireless, slightly strange disciple from the herb garden who never complained and never took the good seams. And that reputation was the most valuable thing I owned. If you had asked any of the 200 people mining alongside me who I was, they would have said, the quiet one, the gardener, he's always here. That is where I met Tao Min and He Xia and Lu Chen and Yang Tao, all of whom are going to matter later and none of whom are going to matter now. And it is where the Heavenly Saint Sect finally made a move. Her name was Shen Yun, senior sister, on paper. Undercover, in fact, and I had appraised her 3 weeks earlier because she had transferred onto my shift, and transfers are worth a look. She cornered me in a side tunnel on the 4th level, in a section that had been worked out and abandoned, where nobody goes because there is nothing there. I want to note what she thought she was doing. I was, at that moment, Golden Core, concealed as Foundation Establishment late stage. She had checked. She had checked properly, with a technique, and she had checked twice, and the answer both times was Gardener. She was very sure. Mountain suppressing. Second style of the Heavenly Blade. I had not used it on a person before. It is not like Moonslash, which is quick and clean and arrives. Mountain suppressing comes down. It does not cut so much as insist, and the thing it insists on is that whatever is underneath it should be lower. Then I put her in the lava. The mining field is full of lava. That is why the ore is what it is. And a body in lava is not a body, it is a rumor, and rumors do not testify. I would like to say that was the end of the Heavenly Saint Sect's interest in me. It was the beginning. They have been circling for 9 years. They are still circling. Fairy Mingyi still comes to my fence and smiles and asks about drainage. And once a year or so, somebody new transfers onto a shift near mine and stays for 2 months and leaves. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor about me specifically, I became famous by accident. There was an incident at the mining field. A man named Dong Lei, Zhuantian sect, true disciple, favored by the mountains and seas, one of the highest value intelligence targets our sect had ever had inside its perimeter, was in the middle of escaping. He had been made. He had been cornered. And he had a spatial talent, which is the single hardest thing in the world to hold. And he had set up a teleport and triggered it. He was gone. Actually gone, mid-technique, the kind of exit that nobody catches and everybody writes an apologetic report about. And I threw a 10,000 sword talisman. 1. From about 90 feet away. Not at him particularly. I was in the middle of a general engagement. There were 11 people fighting in a space built for 4, and I threw a thing at a place where a thing needed to be thrown. It landed inside his teleport formation and shut it down. I want to be honest. It was not skill. It was volume. I had been in that fight for 6 minutes, and that was my 9th talisman. But it worked, and it was recorded, and my name went onto the sect merit list, top 10, in writing, publicly, where every single disciple in 12 branches could read it. I have never in my life wanted anything less. Because the merit list is not an honor in a demonic sect. I'll explain what it actually is. It is a menu. It says, here is a man with resources. Here is a man with standing, which means beating him transfers standing. Here is a man whose name is known, which means the branch seniors will hear about it. And crucially, here is a man with no faction behind him, because if he had a faction, the faction would be listed next to the name. Every branch has ambitious young cultivators who need a reputation, and I had just posted mine on the wall with a note saying, unclaimed. For the next 4 years, I would be challenged, provoked, poisoned, framed, robbed, cornered, and set up more or less continuously by people whose entire reasoning was that beating the merit list gardener would look extremely good on their own record. I counted, at one point, out of curiosity. 22 formal challenges in 18 months. Li Chong started taking them for me. Let me describe how I found out because I did not find out from him. A disciple from Henglu Waterfall challenged me in the market. I accepted and set a date and went home to work out how to lose without looking like I was losing. And on the date, I arrived at the ground and the man was already there, sitting down, holding his arm, and Li Chong was standing over him. He had heard about the challenge. He had gone and found the man the previous evening and fought him himself and won, and informed him that emotion-severing cliff to segments from people who cannot beat Li Chong first. He did this 11 times over 2 years. He never told me, not once. I found out about the 11th one the same way I found out about the first. His stated reasoning, when I finally asked him about it directly, was that I was weak, that this was well known, and that it was undignified for the branch to have its outer disciples beaten in public by other branches. He beat all 11 of them. He is very, very good. I said thank you. I meant it, and he was visibly uncomfortable, and he told me to work harder. It is still one of the strangest kindnesses I have ever received, and he would be genuinely furious if he knew I found it moving. And then the delegation came. Zhuantian Sect, Luoxia Sect, Fenglei Sect, 3 of the 4 significant powers in the surrounding region, and the 4th was us. 13 envoys standing outside our mountain gate, immortal sect grade, every one of them. I could not see the top of the range on 2 of them, which at Golden Core means they were at minimum primordial spirit. Their demand was straightforward, and it was read out loud, in the open, in front of perhaps 400 assembled disciples. The Heavenly Sound Sect had, over the preceding 2 years, killed and captured a number of their people. There was a list. The list had names on it. One of the names was mine. So, hand over Chen Guang or cripple him publicly, and the 3 sects would consider the matter settled. I was at the back of the crowd. Foundation establishment late stage, publicly. Golden Core, actually. And I was doing the honest arithmetic, which was that I was one man, that there were 3 immortal sects, that our acting sect leader was formidable but not that formidable, and that a sect which is offered a way to avoid a war for the price of 1 outer disciple has historically always taken it. I estimated, about 4 minutes. I had already worked out which gate. I had a talisman in my left sleeve. I want to describe what happened next as precisely as I can, because I was there, at the back, watching, and I still do not entirely believe it. Nobody negotiated. Elder Lin Shui did not step forward. The branch heads did not confer. There was no counteroffer, no delay, no request for evidence. A woman in red and white appeared in the air above the gate. Most of the people present had no idea what they were looking at. There were 400 disciples in that courtyard, and I would estimate that fewer than 20 knew her face, and I was not one of them. Not really. I knew a smell and a set of robes and a feeling in my chest like a door opening on a furnace. She did not announce herself. She did not speak at all. She moved one arm. They called it moon shadow afterward. I do not know if that is the technique's name or a word somebody invented later because the event needed a label and people cannot leave things unlabeled. 12 of the 13 envoys came apart where they stood. I'll be accurate about the timing. I do not think it took 2 seconds. I do not think most of them registered that anything had begun. There was a delegation, and then there was a weather event, and then there was one man standing alone in a courtyard full of red. The 13th was left alive, deliberately. He was not injured. He was simply the only one still assembled, and after a moment, he understood what he was for, and he turned around and walked back down the mountain to deliver the answer. The entire southern region went quiet about me after that, not because I had done anything, because the price of asking had been posted, in public, in a form that did not require any follow-up correspondence. And I stood in that crowd of 400 people knowing something that nobody else on the mountain knew, which was that the entity that had just done that lived, functionally, in my house. 3 or 4 times a year, and drank tea I could not afford, and had 6 weeks earlier taken my second-best knife. Let me say something about the difference between fear and terror, because I did not understand it until that afternoon. Fear is what you feel about a thing that might hurt you. Terror is what you feel about a thing that has, so far, decided not to. Now I need to introduce the man who is the actual villain of this story, and I need to do it carefully, because our entire relationship takes place without him ever once learning my name. Shu An. 100-Bone Forest, which is one of the 12 branches, and by a distance the wealthiest. Shu An is their best, top 5 on the sect merit list. Late Yuan Shen stage, which put him 3 full grades above me at the time, and 2 above me for most of this story. And his specialty is not the sword, it is spirit medicine. He grows things. He is, genuinely, one of the great cultivators of his generation at it. I have appraised his work, and I have appraised professional work from 3 other sects, and there is no comparison. He can do things with soil that the Candlefire Alchemy Court cannot do with a furnace. And what he does with that talent is this. He supplies spirit medicine to the other branches, for free, as a courtesy. Every quarter, a delivery arrives at your garden with a polite note from the generous senior brother at 100-Bone Forest, who believes the sect should share its strengths. Everyone likes him. That is not sarcasm. Ask anybody in this sect about Shu An, and you will get a warm answer, because he has spent 15 years being the one person in a demonic sect who gives things away. And inside every batch, he plants his techniques. Spirit sealing technique, heart demon technique, nutrient beads that sit in the soil and quietly restructure the chi of everything growing in it, and of everybody who spends 6 hours a day breathing over that soil. He seeds entire branches with slow, invisible, completely deniable influence. Not control, exactly. Erosion. The disciples in a garden he has supplied for 6 years advance a little slower than they should, and do not know why. Their branch head thinks slightly better of 100-Bone Forest than the evidence supports, and by the time anybody might notice, there is nothing to point at. All anybody ever did was accept a gift. His medicine came to my garden too. Every quarter, polite note, never asked for anything, and his sealing technique failed on me. That is the entire inciting incident of the war that occupies the rest of this story. Every other garden it worked on, quietly, for years. Mine, it slid off. Because of the Hongmeng Heart Sutra and the Purple Qi, and because I had been reading every single batch that arrived at my gate with daily appraisal since the season it started coming, I knew exactly what was in it. I had known for 2 years, and I did nothing about it, because what was I going to do? Accuse a top 5 true disciple of gardening? But he noticed. He did not know who. He did not know how. He simply observed that in one specific location, his work stopped producing results, and that this had been true for some time, and that the only explanation for a technique failing consistently in one garden is that somebody in that garden had seen it, and somebody who can see it is a problem. So he began probing, politely, small adjustments to the deliveries, different compositions, a query passed down through official channels about our soil composition. The kind of thing that looks like professional curiosity, and is a man walking the fence line. And I, being 22 years old and having had a very good couple of years, made a decision that I would like to defend and cannot. I decided to stop him first, which brings me to the Whispering Slate and to the strangest job I have ever held. It began as a rock. Elder Lin Shu passed it down through my master, in the usual manner, which is to say Gao Lei handed me a wrapped object and told me to go back to work. It is a slab of dark stone about the size of 2 hands. No markings, no mechanism, no visible function whatsoever, and I appraised it and got a description that took me 3 readings to accept. What it does is this. At certain hours, on certain nights, it opens a room. Not a physical room, a space. And in that space, the holders of the matching slates can see each other as shapes, and speak, and trade. There are 5 of us. At the top, presiding, is a figure who calls himself Senior Shen. I have no idea what he is. I have spent 7 years trying to work it out. He answers questions, any question, about cultivation, about history, about techniques that have not existed for 1,000 years, about the internal politics of sex on the other side of the world. He is never wrong. He has never once said that he does not know something, and I have tested that, carefully, 4 times. He sets tasks. He pays for them in knowledge, and the price he charges for everything is information about the world. Below him are 4, each in a different region, each under a code name. Shadow, in the south, Tianan Prefecture, next door to us, which took me 4 years to determine and nearly killed me when I did. Kai, overseas, Ming, in the east, and me. My codename is Spring. Now, here is what Song Ling actually wanted from me, and it took me years to understand the size of it. She did not want a spy inside a rival sect. She has spies inside rival sects. She has Elder Lin Shu, who is extremely good at this. She wanted to know who is behind the slates. Somebody manufactured 5 of these objects. Somebody distributed them across 4 regions and an ocean. Somebody built a marketplace where the most dangerous people alive trade secrets 4 times a year and has been sitting at the top of it for an unknown length of time, harvesting the entire world's intelligence in exchange for answers. She wants a name. So my job, the actual job, the one under the gardening, is to sit in that room 4 times a year as a peer, alongside people who are unmistakably monsters, and never once let any of them work out that I am a foundation establishment gardener from a regional demonic sect who arrived directly from watering a plant. Let me convey the pressure of that. These are people who mention, in passing, that they have spent the season hunting a void return fugitive across 3 regions. Shadow once described, as a minor anecdote, arranging the deaths of 11 people in a single night. Kai is somewhere overseas doing something to his own body that I still do not fully understand, and I am in the circle, nodding. So I built a persona, aloof, silent, speaks rarely. When he speaks, it is important, never explains, never asks for help, never ever displays curiosity, because curiosity is a shape, and shapes can be measured. And to establish it, I did the single best thing I have ever done, and I did it about 8 months in when I could feel Kai starting to probe. I caught a dragon. Not a full one. Kai had mentioned in the previous session that he had been hunting one and lost it. A young dragon, injured, running, last seen heading inland, and he had asked casually whether anyone had seen anything. I found it. It took 11 days and it went into the southern hills and it very nearly killed me twice. And I used Universe in Palm, which is a sealing technique I had acquired by then, and I put the entire creature inside a bead the size of a thumbnail. And at the next gathering, I put the bead on the table without a word. Nobody in that room has ever asked me a personal question since. I want to take you inside one of those sessions properly, because I have been describing the room and you have not been in it. It happens at midnight. You take out the slate and you enter, and there is no travel involved and no sensation of movement. You are in your own house, and then you are in a space with no floor and no walls that your eyes keep trying to give a size to and failing. There are 5 positions. They are fixed. I have been in the same one for 7 years. At the top, Senior Shen. He does not have a face, not obscured, absent, in a way that your attention slides off. And after 7 years, I could not tell you whether he is old, or young, or male, or a man at all. Below him, 3 shapes. Shadow is small, and wears green, and is unmistakably a woman. And she speaks more than any of the rest of us combined. She asks questions constantly. That is her method, and it is extremely effective. Because in a room where everybody is hiding, the person asking is the one accumulating. Kai is broad and gives the impression of height. He is overseas. He talks about women more more than a man in that room should, and it took me 2 years to work out that this is deliberate, and that he has extracted an enormous amount of intelligence by seeming to be an idiot about it. Ming is Eastern, precise, and I worked out in year 3 that he is bright moon sect, which is a fact I have never once acted on. And me, Spring, silent. The structure never changes. Senior Shen opens by asking whether anyone has cultivation problems. That is not politeness. That is the payment schedule. He answers cultivation questions free, because a functioning agent is worth more than a stalled one. I have asked one question in 7 years, and it was about formations, and his answer was talent, a great teacher, diligence, enough time, and enough formations. He then explained that a man without talent can substitute volume by taking apart other people's formations until the patterns stop being foreign, which is the most useful thing anybody has ever said to me, and also a polite way of saying that I am not good at this. Then he asks about standing tasks. The standing task, in my case, has been the same for 7 years. Any information about the heavenly fragrance Dao flower. 4 times a year, for 7 years, a man has asked a room containing me whether anybody has news about the plant in my back garden. And 4 times a year I have said nothing, along with everybody else, and moved on. I want to describe the specific quality of that. It is not fear after the first 2 years. It becomes a kind of professional discipline. There is a correct facial expression for hearing the name of the thing you are sitting on, and it is mild interest, and I can produce it on command. Then new tasks are set. They come with payment attached, and the payment is knowledge, and Senior Shen does not haggle. Find out who is hunting the heavenly extreme misfortune pearl, and you may ask me anything. Go into the corpse realm and copy the true contents of the 6th steel on Heavenly Steel Mountain and name your price. That last one is the one that told me what he actually is, because he specified the surface content of the 6th steel is not the real content, which means he has already read the surface content, which means he has been there or had somebody there, and he wants the real one from somebody else at cost. He is completing something. I have known that for 4 years, and I have never once said it out loud in that room. Then comes trading, which is the part that is genuinely dangerous, because trading is where you reveal your shape. If you want a thing, the wanting tells them where you are. I have asked for exactly 3 things in 7 years. A method of finding traces of luck, a complete encyclopedia of written languages, and the location of somebody who knows every spoken language completely. None of those 3 tell anybody anything, which is why I chose them. And then, at the end, the part I actually come for. They talk about their regions. Shadow describes the South, Kai describes overseas, Ming describes the East. And I sit there 4 times a year and receive a briefing on the political condition of the entire world, delivered by 3 people who are each individually better informed than most sect leaders, in exchange for nothing at all, because that part is free. That is what the gathering is, not a conspiracy, a market with a very good librarian at the top of it, and 4 people who cannot afford to leave. And Song Ling wants his name. I have been in that room 28 times, and I have 3 facts about him. He knows every technique in the world. He is completing a collection. And he has never, in 7 years, asked a single question that would help him find any of us. They simply assumed. I have no idea what they assumed. Whatever it was substantially better than the truth, and it was permanent, and I have been coasting on it for 7 years. The gathering paid enormously. I got the curse technique out of it. I got the 7-star seal method. I eventually got a complete encyclopedia of every written language in the world, which sounds decorative and was not. I got warnings months in advance about things that were coming toward my province, and on one particular night, I got the sentence that started everything else. Senior Shen mentioned, in the course of assigning tasks, that the Great Thousand Divine Sect was investigating the Heavenly Sound Sect. Not for territory, not for the flower. They were looking for someone connected to something called the End of All Things. Nobody in that room had heard of it. Not Shadow, not Kai, not Ming. I wrote it down. That name is going to come back, and it is going to try to end the world, and I would like it noted for the record that I flagged it early and nobody listened, including me. Then the demon cave went wrong. Second assignment, 3 years after the first, different team, and this time the defense line at the mouth collapsed behind us and sealed us in. I'll walk through this properly rather than summarizing it because it is where I picked up the object that has been the central problem of my life ever since. There were 4 of us inside, Guo Li, Shi Lei, Zhou Hu, and me. I want to describe the first hour after the collapse because it explains everything that followed. Nobody panicked. That is the thing about cultivators. 4 people watched 200 tons of rock come down across the only exit, and the immediate response was an orderly inventory, food, water, talismans, medicine, and how long each of them would last. The answer was between 4 and 7 weeks, depending on whether we found water. And then Zhou Hu said the thing that everybody had already worked out, which was that the numbers were considerably better with 3 people than with 4. He was not threatening anybody. He was reading out an arithmetic result. That is how it is done down there. Guo Li ran a charm technique on me on the 3rd day. Let me be fair to her because it was a reasonable play. 4 people sealed in with a finite supply, and one of the 4 is an unremarkable foundation establishment gardener who is going to be the liability. Establishing control over the weakest member before the resources tighten is basic tunnel politics, and she did it early, which is correct. She started small. She sat next to me on the second night and asked whether I was frightened, and put a hand on my wrist while I answered. And on the third day, she ran the technique properly. It did nothing at all. So she ran it again, harder, with her whole attention behind it, and it did nothing at all. And I sat there looking mildly confused because that is my job. And I watched her face do arithmetic, because a charm technique that fails does not fail quietly. There is no ambiguity from the caster's side. Within about 4 seconds, she knew that the man in front of her had something in him she had never encountered, and that he had let her try it twice. And I'll be honest about what changed at that moment, because it was not her plan. It was her assessment of what she was standing next to. She stopped talking to me entirely. She started sleeping on the far side of the chamber. And on the 7th day, I overheard her telling Shirley, quietly, that the gardener was not a gardener, and that they should handle it before the food got low. She went into the abyss on the 9th day. There is a ledge. It runs about 40 feet along the eastern wall of the 3rd chamber, and drops into something with no bottom that any of our light reached, and it is the obvious route to the lower levels, and all 4 of us used it daily. I am not going to pretend it was an accident. Shirley went on the 12th day in a fight. Let me describe accurately, because it is the only time in this story that somebody nearly took me at my actual strength. He was foundation establishment perfection. He was a formation specialist, and he had spent 3 days quietly building one, and I did not notice because I was not looking for it, because a man building a formation in a sealed cave looks identical to a man securing a camp. He triggered it while I was asleep. I woke up inside a suppression array with my chi at about 1/3, and Shirley standing at the edge of it with a spear. The 9 heavens shoulder guard took the first thrust. The second one went through my side. State clearly that I won that fight because of withered wood meets spring and for no other reason. He put 4 holes in me over about 6 minutes, and every one of them closed, and around the 4th he began to understand that the arithmetic had gone wrong, and by then the array had degraded because arrays cost chi to hold, and he had been holding it while fighting. Joe Hu did not fight me at all. He came to me on the 14th day, sat down, and proposed a partnership. 2 men, remaining supplies, better odds. He was entirely sincere, and he made a good case, and he had clearly thought about it for some time. I agreed. We worked together for 6 days. He was genuinely competent, and he saved my life once, on a bad ledge, without hesitating. And on the 20th day, he tried to open my storage ring while I was meditating. Let me be clear that I do not hold that against him. I had been going to do the same thing. The only difference between us is that I was awake. And then, in a section that was not on any map our sect possessed, I met a dwarf demon. He had a command stone. I want to explain what that is, because it is the only reason any of the rest happened. The demon cave is not a cave, it is a structure. It has doors, and the doors are keyed, and the demons in the upper levels are not inhabitants, they are overflow. He was called Stone Turtle Stream. He was about 4 feet tall. He was extremely intelligent, and he negotiated with me for 2 hours before it went wrong. I'll give you that negotiation, because it is the only conversation I have ever had with something that was not human, and it was better than most of the ones I have had with people. He spoke, properly, in our language, with an accent I could not place and a vocabulary better than mine. He opened by asking me why I had come down this far, which is the correct opening, because it establishes that he has been watching and that he is not afraid. I said I was looking for a way out. He said there was no way out, and that this was not a threat, simply the geography, and that the thing above us was not a cave and had not been built with exits in mind. Then he told me what it is. The demon cave is a structure. The demons in the upper levels are not inhabitants. They are overflow, the pressure release of something considerably further down which has been leaking for an extremely long time, and which our sect has been harvesting the runoff of for 40 years without ever once asking what the runoff is coming from. He had a command stone. It opens doors, not all of them, and what he wanted in exchange was extremely reasonable, which is what made it dangerous. He wanted me to carry something out, not information, an object, small. He described its size with his hands and did not describe anything else about it, and when I asked what it was, he said that a man who does not know what he is carrying cannot be made to explain it. Which is a good answer. It is, in fact, exactly the answer I would have given. We went round it for 2 hours. He was patient. He was extremely patient, in a way that I understood at the time was itself information. A creature that has all the time in the world is a creature that expects to still be here after this conversation. And at the end of the 2nd hour, I asked him one question, which was whether the thing he wanted carried out was his, and he paused. That is all. He paused for perhaps half a second before he said yes. Let me explain what that pause meant, because it saved my life and I have thought about it ever since. He did not pause because he was lying. He paused because he was deciding how much of the truth to give me, and the fact that there was a decision to make meant that the true answer was long, and a long answer about ownership means the object has been owned by several parties, and objects that have been owned by several parties in a place like that have generally killed all of them. So I took the stone instead, and I opened a door I should not have opened, and I went down into ruins that were old enough that the stonework had lost its edges, and the writing on the walls was in no language I have ever been able to identify, and I have since had access to an encyclopedia of all of them. And in the ruins, in a sealed alcove, there was a bead. I appraised it. Obviously, I appraised it. It was the only thing in the room. And then I stood absolutely still for a very long time. The Heavenly Extreme Misfortune Pearl. I am going to explain what that is, and I want you to take it at face value, because I did not, and it cost me. It is not a treasure. It is a luck-type divine object, and the luck it carries is bad. Not unlucky, not cursed. Bad luck as a structural property of the universe, concentrated into an object the size of a plum and given a rate of release. Left alone, sealed, it leaks, slowly, outward, and things in the region it leaks into stop working. Crops, formations, breakthroughs, marriages, the health of children. It does not attack anything. It simply makes the odds wrong, everywhere, forever, in an expanding circle. Fully awake, it does not damage a province. It removes one. It cannot be destroyed. That is not a limitation of my strength. It is a property of the thing. It has been in the world for an unknown length of time, and every civilization that has met it has done exactly one thing, which is seal it, and hide the seal, and hope. And it was in my hand, 200 feet under a demon cave, and I had already touched it. That is the part that mattered. The karma attaches on contact. I could not put it back on the shelf and walk away, because there was no longer a version of the world in which I had not picked it up. I could not leave it for that reason. I could not sell it because the buyer's first act upon acquisition would be to remove the previous owner, since the previous owner knows. I could not tell anyone because the list of parties who would go to war over it opens with 3 immortal sects and continues into categories of entity I had not yet heard of. So I sealed it. Universe in palm, 1 layer. And the next morning, when it had decayed, I put another one on. And the morning after that. Every single day. Forever. Because the seal degrades, and underneath the seal, there is a countdown, and the countdown does not stop for anything. By the point this story ends, I will have put more than 100 layers on that thing, and I will still check it before I sleep, and there will be a specific number of years remaining that I recalculate every few months and do not tell anybody. I carry a bomb in my pocket and I water plants. That is the job. That is the actual job, underneath the other 2 jobs. Now let me tell you about the 3 months I spent walking, because it is the only holiday I have ever taken, and it was compulsory. Song Ling decided to leave the mountain. There was no discussion. She appeared in my courtyard on an evening in early spring and informed me that we were going, and my travel ban, a formal sect restriction, entered in the law enforcement hall's records, which had governed my movements for 4 years, simply stopped applying, in a manner I did not inquire into. Luo City, then Tiantu City. 3 months, on foot, mostly, because she likes walking. I carried the tea. I want to describe the actual shape of those 3 months, because everybody assumes it was an adventure, and it was closer to being a valet. She walks in front. She does not talk. She stops when something is interesting and does not explain what was interesting about it. And if you ask, she says nothing. And if you do not ask, occasionally she tells you. I made tea twice a day, morning and evening, at whatever inn or roadside we had stopped at, on equipment I carried, and it had to be correct. The tea escalated substantially on that trip. Hongshou fragrance became Hua Qian Shui somewhere around the 2nd week, and Hua Qian Shui is 200 spirit stones per qian, and that is when I began to understand that this was not a series of individual purchases, it was a schedule. There is a shop in Tiantu City that sells nothing else. I went in with 300 stones, intending to be sensible, and came out with tea and no stones, and the woman behind the counter looked at my robe and quoted me the price twice, slowly, to be kind. And there is the bathing. I'll explain this because it happens perhaps 20 times over the next 9 years, and it is the single most stressful recurring event in my life. She takes a bath, and I prepare it. That means water at a temperature she has never once specified, and which I have determined by iteration. It means the room cleaned first. And it means silver moon petals, which are a spirit medicine, which cost roughly a month of my income per portion, and which do not last. And then she says, turn around and don't look back. And I stand on the other side of a screen for however long it takes, with my back to it, listening to the water, silently reciting a calming mantra. Let me state clearly that the heaven-severing goo poison does not help in that room. That is the entire problem. She is the one exception, permanently installed, and there is no version of that arrangement in which the poison protects me from the exception. I have never once looked. I would like the record to show that this is not virtue. I have simply run the arithmetic on what happens if I do, and the arithmetic is bad, and I am extremely good at arithmetic. She took my knife twice on that trip, and somewhere in the middle of it, in Luo City, I went to find my family. I want to handle this carefully because I do not enjoy it, and I am not going to decorate it. I knew the street. That surprised me. I had been 5 years old, and the memory was mostly hunger, but I came around a corner and knew the shape of a roofline, and my feet took the last 100 yards without me. Strangers opened the door. They were decent about it. A couple in their 40s with 2 children and a vegetable frame in the yard where I remembered a wall. They had bought the place from someone, who had bought it from someone. 16 years ago, a family had moved out. The famine year. Half the street had moved out in the famine year. No, they did not know where. No, there was nobody left on the street from that time. I went to the city registry. There is one, and it is badly kept, and the clerk was helpful for 2 hours and found nothing, because people who leave in a famine do not file paperwork. I checked the 2 nearest towns. I checked the temple rolls, which record deaths, on the theory that a death is at least an answer. Nothing. Not a record, not a rumor, not a grave. So I did the only remaining thing, which was to leave a message with the family in the house, in case anybody ever came back and asked. Their son is alive. He is well. He does not hate anybody. And then I left. I am not going to build that into a promise, because I do not believe it is one. That is not a thread I am carrying. That is the shape of what happened to a great many people in a famine year, and it happened to mine, and the world does not keep records of the poor. She did not ask about it. Song Ling was there. She saw the entire thing, from the door to the registry to the walk out of the city, and she did not say one word about it, then or since. For once I was grateful. The rest of that journey was more ordinary, which in my life means 2 attempted killings and a recruitment. A man called Peng Kai came for me on the road 2 weeks later. I want to describe this one properly because it is the only time in 9 years that somebody has come at me correctly. He did not ambush me. He did not disguise himself. He walked out of a tree line at midday on an open road, alone, and told me his name and the name of the man who had sent him. That is the professional method. An ambush can fail, and then you have a hunted target. A direct approach at a range you control cannot fail because the target has already been engaged before he knows there is an engagement. He was golden core on the surface. Underneath it, he was carrying something borrowed, a primordial spirit's power, lent, sitting in his body like a stone in a bag, and it is a technique I have since learned the name of and did not know then. I did not know then. That is the point. I read Golden Core and I opened accordingly at Golden Core Strength out of habit because Song Ling was 200 feet up the road and I did not want to be interesting. His first strike went through my guard and through the 9 heavens shoulder guard and broke 3 ribs. I'll record what I felt, and it was relief because it meant I could stop being careful. I dropped the disguise. Not all of it. Enough. Moonslash at full strength, and he blocked it, which is the only time anybody has ever blocked it, and then mountain suppressing, which he did not. And when it was over, I stood in the road with 3 broken ribs and looked up the road at a woman in red who had not turned around at any point, who had heard every second of it, and who had been perfectly prepared to let me find out about borrowed primordial spirit strength the hard way. She said, when I caught up, "Your guard is low on the left." That is the only combat instruction that woman has ever given me. 4 years of proximity and 1 sentence, delivered while walking, about my left side. I fixed it. It took 8 months. And in Tiantu City, I met the Bright Moon Sect for the first time. Su Yang, Han Yi, Sha Qing, an elder named Mo Ran. Let me describe the experience because it was genuinely disorienting. They were decent, by default, without calculation. A junior of theirs made an error in a market negotiation, and the elder corrected him privately rather than publicly, which cost the elder a position, in which he did anyway. They paid the asking price for a thing they could have simply taken. I had been in a demonic sect since I was 5, and I did not have a mental category for it. I spent 2 days looking for the angle. There was no angle. We traded. I gave them information they wanted, and they gave me a jade pendant, which in their system is a favor, a formal, redeemable obligation, honored by the sect and not by the individual. I still have it. I have never used it. And I picked up a child, Wen Hao, 10 years old. His talent had been tested by the Bright Moon Sect and found unremarkable. His childhood friend, a girl called Lin Zhu, had been tested and found extraordinary, genuinely extraordinary, the kind that makes elders write letters. So they were taking her, and not him. I'll be clear that this was not cruelty. Mo Ran was apologetic about it. There are limited places, the journey east is expensive, and a boy with ordinary talent taken into an immortal sect out of sentiment spends 50 years being the worst person in every room he enters, which is its own kind of harm. I looked at him. He was standing at the edge of the square, trying very hard not to cry in public, and doing an adequate job of it. I appraised him. Ordinary talent. Extraordinary physique. Specifically, a body that converts damage into growth. Not a bloodline, not a legacy. A physique, which is the rarest of the 3 and the only one that cannot be detected by a talent test, because talent tests measure aptitude and physiques do not affect aptitude. An immortal sect would never have found it. They do not test for it. There is no reason to test for it because the odds are absurd. So I asked him whether he wanted to come with me to a demonic sect. My motives, and there were 3. The first is that a boy with a personal connection to a rising Bright Moon Sect prodigy is an asset, and I knew that when I asked, and I have used it since. The second is that a physique like that in the Bright Moon Sect gets nurtured. A physique like that in the Heavenly Sound Sect gets used, and being used is faster. And the third is that I looked at a 10-year-old standing in a square, watching his only friend get on a flying ship, and I did not want to walk away from it. He said yes in about 2 seconds, which should have warned me about him. He is 16 now. He gets knocked unconscious roughly once a week, on schedule, by a girl and a rabbit, at my instruction. His face is usually swollen somewhere. His cultivation speed is, frankly, obscene. He has never once asked me to stop, which brings me, finally, to the part of the story that I do not make jokes about. Wu Qing. She turned up in the outer sect intake when she was about 12, or looked about 12, and she had no memory of anything before the road she had been found on, and she had an appetite that broke the outer sect cafeteria's monthly allocation inside 3 weeks. I appraised her because I appraise everything. Dragon clan, amnesiac, true dragon lineage, dormant, an actual dragon, wearing the shape of a small girl, with no idea. I did the responsible thing and did nothing at all about it, because the correct response to discovering a dragon is to leave it alone and continue with your day. But I did quietly fix her food allowance, because 30 spirit stones a month for a single outer sect disciple is an insane number, and the cafeteria was going to expel her over it inside a month. I have paid it every month for 7 years. I have also paid the cafeteria supervisor, a decent man called Song Bo, several times out of my own pocket for the overages he has covered on her behalf without telling anyone. She had grandparents, not real ones. Gao Yuan and Li Mei, an old couple in the outer sect. Ordinary people, not cultivators, actual mortals, of which this sect has hundreds, who do laundry and grow vegetables and repair roofs for immortals and live for 70 years and then stop. They had found her on the road, they had fed her, they had named her, and they had 2 children of their own, adults, who had gone up into the sect years earlier and not come back, and were not going to, because that is what happens. Their yard has a jujube tree in it. She used to pick white dates off it. The grandmother would tell her they were not ripe, and she would get a stomachache, and she would eat them anyway, and the grandfather used to come up behind her quietly and ask what she was doing, purely to make her jump. He did that for 4 years, every time. She never once saw him coming. And there is a third, and I have been brief about him for 8 years, and I am going to be brief about him now. Tang Kai. 14 when he arrived, from a village 3 days out. He came in on an intake with 2 friends. One, a young master with money, one, a pretty girl with genuine talent. And Tang Kai was neither. There was a starry moon pearl in him. He did not put it there. Nobody knows where it came from. Nobody, including me, has ever been able to determine what it is for. What it does is absorb his qi as fast as he generates it, which means that he cultivates every single day, correctly, diligently, with real discipline, for years, and remains at qi refining stage 1. Stage 1. For 6 years. While everybody he arrived with climbs past him, and then out of sight, and then stops recognizing him in corridors. Every year, the outer sect strikes the names of disciples who are not progressing. It is not cruelty, it is arithmetic. There are more applicants than beds. Every year they were going to strike his. So I went to my master and had it fixed. Not for a year. Permanently. The cliff master of Emotion Severing Cliff personally put a name on a list that nobody in the branch is permitted to touch, on the request of one inner disciple, for reasons he did not ask about, and I did not offer. Neither Tang Kai nor anybody else has ever been told. I switched him to the Star Moon Qi refining method, which at least accumulates star power even when it cannot convert it, so that the effort is stored somewhere instead of simply draining. He reached stage 3, then stage 5. It goes nowhere. He gets beaten, regularly, by disciples who have decided that a stage 1 who will not leave is a personal insult to the standards of the sect. And his mother died the day after she heard her son had become an immortal. She was already dying when he left. She had been dying for a year and had not told him. She carried her remaining grain to a neighbor, on foot, ill, several miles, and gave it away along with everything else she owned. And she told the neighbor that she could rest easy now. She had been holding on for the news. He did not know. He came back 2 years later to tell her about a rabbit that had promised to cure her, and found 2 memorial tablets in the front room and an old woman sweeping the floor. I have not told him about the list, or the cliff master, or any of it. I would like to say that is humility. It is not. It is that a boy who knows a powerful senior brother is protecting him stops being a boy who has to become something. And the entire value of Tang Kai, the whole reason I have spent 8 years on a disciple who has not advanced a single stage, is that he does not stop. The bill for that decision has not come in yet. When it does, I will pay it. Around this time, I did my annual appraisal of Wang Chen, and I want to walk through what has been happening inside that man, because it is the single most insane thing in this story, and it is being conducted entirely for his own amusement. The first year, the report said, born with the dragon's fury, undercover, bored. The second year, there was an addition. He had devoured the remnant soul of a true dragon. I want to explain what a remnant soul is. When something enormous dies, and I mean enormous, the category of creature that gets written into the founding myths of provinces, the body goes and the soul does not entirely. What is left is a fragment, not conscious in the way you are conscious, conscious in the way a fire is hungry. They are usually found in ancient battlefields. Our mining field is an ancient battlefield. Devouring one is possible. It is also the standard way that ambitious cultivators cease to exist, because the fragment does not go quietly. And what generally happens is that a man walks into a cave and something else walks out wearing him. Wang Chen ate one and advanced a stage. Fine. Alarming, but fine. The third year, there was a second edition. He had devoured the remnant soul of a great witch. I read that in my courtyard at dawn and sat down. 2. At the same time, both fragments inside one body, both attempting to possess him, both being slowly digested, and he had advanced another stage on the second one. And then, the following year, the appraisal said this: he has recently sensed that the two remnant souls have made contact with each other. Bored by their lack of progress, he has deliberately acquired a third, a blood demon, from the blood pool in the mining field in order to accelerate the situation. Deliberately. He went and got a third one, completely clear about the reasoning, because the appraisal is explicit about it, and I have reread it many times to make sure I was not projecting. Two ancient predators inside his body had become aware of each other. And rather than exploiting that, rather than letting them fight and cleaning up the survivor, which is the obvious play, he judged that they were being too cautious with each other and that the situation was developing too slowly to hold his interest. So he introduced a third party to create urgency. He is farming them. He buys spirit medicine out of his own income to nourish 3 entities that are actively trying to take his body because a possession that is not progressing is boring, and he wants to see what happens when 3 of them finally decide to move at once. And the final line of that year's appraisal, which is the part that has never stopped being a problem, read, "His interest in you continues to grow. He looks forward to you causing trouble again." That is my police contact. That is the man who investigates every single death I am responsible for, who has now personally handled 4 of my cases, and who has closed all 4. I have made peace with it, mostly. I have also, for 9 years, quietly made sure that there is always something mildly interesting happening near me, because a bored Wang Chen is a Wang Chen who starts opening old files. Now, the Corpse God Sect and the Tower. They are a major northern power. Let me give you the scale properly, because our sect's opinion of itself does not survive contact with it. The Heavenly Sound Sect, plus the 3 sects that sent that delegation, plus everything else in this prefecture, would constitute a rough afternoon for the Corpse God Sect. Not a war, an afternoon. And one of their elders came south, alone, to find the heavenly fragrance Dao flower, Yuan Feng. His strength is such that if he had located me, the encounter would have consisted entirely of him arriving. There would have been no exchange. I would like to be honest about that, because I have spent this entire story explaining how I killed people above my level. And this man was not above my level. He was above my category. He did not find me. He found Song Ling, very high up at night, where nobody could see it and nobody could hear it. And whatever occurred took no appreciable time and made no noise at all. And then they put him in the lawless tower, 5th floor, cell 1. And a month later, somebody had to interrogate him. Let me describe how that assignment reached me, because it is a small masterpiece of institutional logic. The Corpse God Sect elder would not talk. Obviously, he would not talk. He was an elder of a great northern sect. He had 200 years of discipline behind him, and the law enforcement hall's professionals had been working on him for 4 weeks with no result whatsoever. And somebody in the chain of command noted 3 things. The object he had come south to steal was currently growing in the emotion-severing cliff's outer garden. The disciple who tended it was on file. And a man who has spent 4 weeks refusing to talk to professionals might respond differently to the person actually growing the thing. It was, I want to stress, a reasonable idea, and it was also completely wrong about why it worked. So I went into the lawless tower. I'll describe it because I am going to be in that building a great deal from here on, and it is, I think, the most frightening architecture I have ever walked through. It is quiet. That is the first thing. There is no screaming. There is a soft, continuous, extremely low sound that you feel in your back teeth rather than hear, and that is the tower working. The cells are open at the front. You can see in. That is deliberate. A prisoner who can see the corridor can see the other prisoners and can see when one of them stops being on this floor. And the men in them are, physically, fine. That is the part that takes some getting used to. Nobody is chained. Nobody has been beaten. They are simply, visibly, less than they were. You can watch a man who was primordial spirit 6 months ago sit against a wall being golden core and know that in another 6 months he will be somewhere else. Yuan Feng was in cell 1. Disheveled, weak, early Yuan Shen stage, down from something considerably higher. I sat down outside his cell and introduced myself as the disciple who cultivates the heavenly fragrance Dao flower. He told me to get out. I asked him 3 questions. He told me to get out 3 more times, with variations. He was extremely good at it, and around the 4th variation, he stopped bothering to look up. So I went home, and the next morning I came back and said 2 words. Qin Hong. That is the name of an ally he had not told anyone about, an outside contact, a man running divine corpse clones on his behalf, whose existence was the entire structural basis of Yuan Feng's plan for getting out of this building, and whose name did not appear in any Heavenly Sound Sect record, because nobody in the Heavenly Sound Sect had ever heard it. He stopped talking. Not stopped talking to me, stopped talking. He sat against the wall of his cell and looked at me with an expression I have since seen on 4 other men, and it is not fear exactly. It is the specific vertigo of a person recalculating what is possible. I let him sit with it for 8 days, and then I came back and said 2 more words, corpse heart, and a man who had held out for a month against professional interrogators from a demonic sect came apart in front of a gardener with dirt on his hands. Let me explain this trick properly, because it is about to become the longest running joke of my entire life, and I genuinely did not construct it on purpose. I appraise them once a day at dawn from outside the cell. I get the one thing that their entire resistance is built around concealing. Not their secrets in general, the specific load-bearing one, the thing they are protecting everything else with. And then I say it, out loud, in a completely normal voice, and I stand up and leave before they can ask me how I know. The not explaining is the entire technique. If I explain, I am a man who has acquired a piece of information, and a piece of information has a source, and a source can be worked out, and once it is worked out, I am simply a man who got lucky with a spy. If I do not explain, if I say the thing and walk out, then there is no floor. He does not know what else I know. He does not know how far it goes. He has to assume everything, and a man who assumes everything cannot construct a lie, because he does not know which parts he would need to lie about. I have used that on 4 men in this tower. It has worked 4 times. What Yuanfeng eventually gave up over the following 2 months was Qin Hong's operating pattern. I want to explain what a divine corpse clone is, because I had to learn it in a hurry, and it is the most unpleasant thing in this story that is not a doom bead. Qin Hong does not travel. He makes bodies. He takes a corpse, a specific grade of corpse, from a specific kind of death, and he puts a fraction of his own divine soul into it, and it walks around and thinks and negotiates on his behalf, and if it is destroyed, he loses that fraction and nothing else. He had 2 operating in this province, Xie and Wang Lin. They had been here for 11 months. They had jobs. Xie was registered with a merchant house in the nearest city, and had been for the entire time, buying medicinal ingredients in quantities that were slightly wrong in a way nobody had noticed. Wang Lin was a courier, and the pattern Yuanfeng gave me was not their identities. He did not know their identities. It was their resupply interval. A divine corpse clone decays. It has to be maintained on a schedule with a specific material, and the material has to be acquired, and the acquisition is the only part of the operation that cannot be disguised because the material is not sold in this province. So I did not hunt 2 men. I watched a road. Xie took 11 days of waiting and about 4 seconds. I'll be honest that I was frightened of him in a way I had not been frightened of anybody since the cave, because a thing wearing a body is not a man, and I did not know what it would do when the body stopped working. What it did was scream in a voice that was not the voice it had been using, in a language I did not have yet, and then come apart. Wang Lin was harder, because Wang Lin had heard about Xie. I got him 19 days later, at the resupply point, which he approached correctly and cautiously and from the wrong direction, and I'll note that he nearly had me. He was faster than the first one, and he had a technique I have never seen since that stopped my chi for about 1.5 seconds. I killed him with a dagger, not the heavenly blade, a dagger at arm's length, because at that range with my chi stopped, there was nothing else available. And on the second body, I found the corpse heart. I sealed it. And I have it, and it constitutes a permanent grip on Yuanfeng's throat, which I have now used approximately 40 times over several years to obtain formation theory, corpse realm geography, and on one occasion, the answer to a question about Northern Sect politics that saved my life. He knows. That is the part that makes it work. He knows exactly what I am doing, and he cooperates anyway, because as long as Qin Hong is at large, there is a version of the future where he gets out, and I am the only person on this mountain who can take that version away from him. To bring prey into the den, you have to give it hope, not comfort, hope. Despair makes a man useless, and comfort makes him settled, and hope makes him do what you want for years. I did not invent that. I read it off an appraisal of his own thinking, and then I used it on him. And then the corpse world flower bloomed in our spirit herb garden. I had nothing to do with this. I have never been able to determine what caused it. Nobody has ever grown one deliberately in the recorded history of the corpse god sect, who are the only people who possess them, and they hold them the way an empire holds a mint. What it does is open a passage to somewhere else, not a secret realm, a territory with weather and geography and things living in it. And the corpse god sect has controlled access to the ones they own for several centuries, and has built a substantial part of their power on it. And one bloomed in the outer garden of the least fashionable branch of a mid-tier southern demonic sect, and the credit landed on me, entirely by accident. It bloomed in a section I was responsible for, in a garden I ran, and the paperwork does not have a field for I have no idea. My master gave me 5,000 spirit stones without a single word about it. I took them. I have never corrected anybody, and I am not going to. And I would like it noted that the largest single payment I have ever received in my life was for something I did not do, occurring in a place I was standing. And then the grandparents died. Let me slow down here, and I'm going to tell it in order, because the order is what I have. They were old, that is all. There was no plot, nobody killed them, nothing was arranged, no faction had any interest in them whatsoever. They were two ordinary mortals in their 70s in a world where the person walking past them in the corridor might live for 1,000 years, and their bodies simply finished. I knew a month out, because I appraise everything, because I had appraised them years earlier, out of an idle sense of due diligence about the people who were raising a dragon, and because I appraised them again that spring, and the reading changed. There is no version of my ability that lets me not know. I did not tell her. State that plainly, and I am not going to defend it. I had a month, and I spent it doing nothing, because I could not think of a single sentence that made the month better instead of worse. The grandmother went first. I was there. I had come, that afternoon, on an invented errand because I had done the arithmetic on the appraisal, and I had a range. The house is 2 rooms. There is a jujube tree in the yard. The floor is packed earth, and it is swept because she swept it every day for 40 years and had swept it that morning. Wu Qing had gone to the kitchens to get her something. She came back with an egg. I want to explain about the eggs, and I am going to do it quickly. They kept chickens. They had kept chickens for decades, and in all that time, neither of them had ever eaten an egg, because an egg can be sold, and the money from an egg is real money to people who have none. They saved them for her. She had worked that out at some point in the previous year on her own, and had started refusing them, and they had started hiding them in her food. So she came back across the yard holding 1 egg, boiled, in both hands, because that was the thing she had, and she came through the door too fast, and she dropped it. It went on the swept floor and broke, and she stood there and looked at it. Let me be honest that I have thought about that egg more than I have thought about almost anything else in this story, more than the doom bead, more than the woman in my courtyard. The grandmother did not say anything about the egg. She was worried about the bamboo shoots. That was what she kept coming back to in the last hour when she was in and out of it. There were bamboo shoots at the back of the yard that were ready and that she had been meaning to dig up, and she wanted somebody to get them before they went woody, and she asked about them 4 times. And Wu Qing sat down on the floor by the bed and said, very reasonably, in the tone of somebody correcting an administrative error, that this could not be happening yet, because her grandmother had not told her the story about the little conch. It had been promised. It had been put off. She had been waiting. She was not upset when she said it. That is the part I cannot get past. She was explaining that there had been an agreement. Their 2 children had gone up into the sect years earlier and had not come back. That is not cruelty either. It is ordinary. A mortal family sends a child into a sect. The child advances. The child's life becomes measured in centuries, and the parents' does not. And after 20 years, the visits stop. And after 30, the child cannot really remember why they would go. It happens in every sect in the world, constantly, and nobody writes it down. I let them see them, both of them, the son and the daughter, coming through the door in the evening together, the way you would if you had heard and had dropped everything. I am not going to explain how. It is not a technique that reflects well on anybody, and it took 2 things I could not easily replace. And it was not real. Absolutely clear about that, because I have never once told myself otherwise. It was not them. It was not going to become them. The actual son and the actual daughter were 3 provinces away and did not know and were not going to be told. It was enough. They both went quietly, within about 6 hours of each other, which happens more often than you would think with people who have been married for 50 years. And they both went thinking their family had come home. Afterward, Wu Qing stood in the yard for a long time. I did not say anything to her. I have gone over that as well, and I still do not know what the sentence would have been. And a few weeks after that, she started using my surname. Nobody suggested it. There was no conversation. She simply started signing the cafeteria ledger as Chen Wu Qing and correcting people who used the old one, and I found out about it from an appraisal, which is a genuinely stupid way to find out something like that. She is a dragon. She will live for thousands of years. She has already, inside 1 ordinary human lifetime, outlived the only 2 people who ever loved her, and she is going to do that again and again and again, for as long as she keeps making the mistake of caring about anybody at all. And I put my name on her. I have thought about that more than almost anything else in this entire story, and I do not have a conclusion, and I am not looking for one. I made mid-stage primordial spirit that winter, 24 years old. Publicly, foundation establishment late stage, which was becoming a genuinely difficult lie to maintain, because foundation establishment late stage is not supposed to be able to do any of the things I was routinely doing in front of witnesses. The gathering that season was the one where the shape of the world finally came into focus, and I'll lay out what came out of it, because every single thread in the rest of this story was already on the table by the end of that night. Senior Shen explained the 7-star seal method, which I had acquired the previous session and could not make work. Kai reported that something was emerging from the seabed overseas, and that there were sounds coming from it, and that nobody had been able to determine what. Ming reported that the Bright Moon sect had recruited a disciple of extraordinary talent, and that the sect's leadership had had an internal fight over who would take her, and that the fight had gone high enough to wake people who had not been awake in a century. I did not say anything, because the disciple was called Lin Shu, and there was a boy in my outer sect getting punched into the ground every week on my instructions who had known her since he was 6. And Senior Shen told us what the Great Thousand Divine sect was actually doing in our prefecture. They were investigating the Heavenly Sound sect on behalf of the End of All Things. And then he explained what that is, and I wrote it down word for word that night, and here it is. The End of All Things is not a sect. It has core members and it has countless outer members, and the outer members are not recruited, they are found. They are people whose lives have gone wrong in a specific way. Not poor people, not oppressed people, people who have been personally, comprehensively, and unjustly destroyed, and who have concluded from that experience that the world is not fixable and should be ended. They exist in every sect, in every family, in every rank, from chi refining to void return. And they do not know each other, mostly, and they cannot be identified by any technique, because there is nothing wrong with them except a conclusion. What they collect is seals. Every sealed catastrophe in the world, every doom object every civilization has ever buried and hoped about. They find them, and they open them. I sat in that circle with a heavenly extreme misfortune pearl in my pocket, listening to a man explain that there is an organization dedicated to finding exactly that and unsealing it, and that its members are unidentifiable, and that they are everywhere. I did not say anything. I'll be clear that this was not composure. I had nothing to say. There is no sentence you can contribute to that conversation while holding the thing. Now, Sue Ann. Everything I have just described was happening while a man in 100-bone forest was quietly walking my fence line, and I had spent 2 years deciding what to do about it. And what I decided was the worst thing I have ever done to another person. The gathering had paid me in a technique called the curse. Let me explain what it is, because the name undersells it. It is not a hex. It does not make bad things happen. It establishes a connection between the caster and a target, and then transmits ruin down that connection, continuously, for as long as the caster keeps paying. And what arrives at the other end is not damage. It is degradation. Formations blacken and stop holding. Magic treasures crack along lines that were never weak. Medicinal pills lose potency in sealed containers. Cultivation destabilizes, slowly, in a way that no healer can identify because there is no injury. There is simply a man whose foundation is getting worse. And it backfires. Hard. It is explicitly a technique that injures 1,000 to injure 800. And everybody who uses it knows that going in. I built a tri-formation in my courtyard. 3 layers, keyed together, and at the center I put a shield, a thing called the Rui Mountain Shield that I had picked up in the Demon Cave ruins and had never found a use for, to sit between me and the return. And I aimed it at 100-bone forest. And then I did it for 6 months. I want to describe the rhythm because it was, genuinely, the most tedious atrocity of my life. 1 month earning spirit stones, 1 month cursing, repeat, because it costs. Materials mostly, and time, and the recovery. So the cycle was work, save, spend it all on a month of ruining a man's life, work, save, spend it all again. The first month, I took the backlash myself, deliberately and undefended because I needed to measure it. My flesh withered. Let me be literal about that. It is not a metaphor. Patches of skin and muscle on my forearms and across my ribs simply stopped being alive and came away, and underneath there was nothing that looked like a person. Withered wood meets spring, a divine ability I had picked up 2 years earlier, which repairs the body continuously, and which I had regarded until then as a convenience, put it back on. Slowly, over 11 days while I kept working. And the heavenly extreme misfortune pearl in my pocket ate the residue, because it turns out misfortune has a food chain, and a concentrated doom object regards a mere curse the way a man regards a fly. So I had my measurement. The backlash was survivable, indefinitely, as long as I had both of those, and I did. Meanwhile, in 100-bone forest, Xuan was sitting in a courtyard surrounded by his own ruined treasures, coughing blood into his spirit medicine beds, watching his late Yuan Shen cultivation become unstable for the first time in his life, with no injury, no attacker, and no source. His junior sister, a woman called Nian, who has been at his side this entire story and who I have never once spoken to, asked him who could possibly be doing it, and he went through it properly. That is the thing about him. He did not rage. He sat down and listed everyone he had delivered spirit medicine to in the relevant period. 5 people, 3 branches. Emotion Severing Cliff, Candle Fire Alchemy Court, Hongliu Waterfall. Nian suggested Wu Tian, the 10th chief disciple, on the grounds that Xuan had recently announced a challenge for his position and that Wu Tian had an obvious motive. And Xuan said no, immediately. He said it could not be him, and he was right, and he had no evidence at all. Then he asked which of the 5 was most suspicious, and he answered his own question. Emotion Severing Cliff. He is at Foundation Establishment late stage, and my technique has no effect on him. He has already seen through my technique and cracked it. Nian asked why. Why him specifically, over the others, over anyone? And Xuan said, it's just intuition. There's no reason. He was completely, precisely correct, and he could not prove one single word of it, and there was no mechanism in the entire sect by which a top 5 true disciple could act on a hunch about an outer cliff gardener. I'll be honest about how that felt. It felt like being seen, not caught, seen. For 2 years, I had been the only person on this mountain who knew what I was, and then there was a second one, and he was 3 grades above me, and the only thing standing between him and me was that his own reputation for reasonableness would not let him accuse a nobody without cause. He had a plan for it, though. He always has a plan. The Chief Disciple Challenge was in 1 month. He would win it, become a chief, and then, with a chief's authority, he would come to Emotion Severing Cliff personally and look at that garden and at that man and find out. His master had told him he had no chance. His senior sister, the 5th-ranked chief, had told him the same. He went anyway. And to get through the challenge with 6 months of my work in his bones, he took a pill. Mian asked him about the side effects, and he told her, calmly, that there was a real possibility it would drop him to late Yuan-Shen permanently, and that it did not matter, because the curse was going to drop him to mid-stage primordial spirit anyway if it continued, and because once he was a chief, none of it would be a problem. That is the villain of this story. He is not cruel, he is not arrogant, he plans further ahead than I do, he is more disciplined than I am, and he is willing to spend his own cultivation like currency. The only thing wrong with him is that he has spent 15 years quietly putting his hands inside other people's foundations, and he has never once considered that this might be a thing somebody would object to. And he had, at that point, no idea who I was, and he was 1 month away from having the authority to find out. And then, one evening in the 6th month, I walked into my courtyard, and there was a red figure standing under the tree. I did not hear the rabbit hit anything. That is worth noting. She had not bothered. I got about 4 feet in. "You seem to really like this kind of obscene stuff," she said. I opened my mouth to explain. I'll log that as an error. Explaining is a movement. And then I was airborne. The sequence, because I have had 9 years to reconstruct it, and I still cannot. There was no strike. I did not see one. I have never seen one. There is a moment in which I am standing somewhere, and then there is a moment in which the geography has changed and I am elsewhere, traveling. And the space between those 2 moments does not contain anything I can access. I went backwards out of my own gateway, and I remember thinking with total clarity that I was about to hit the fence, and bracing for the fence. And then discovering that I had already passed the fence some time ago, and there was nothing behind me at all, because the gateway opens onto the bank, and the bank is 11 feet, and beyond that is the river. I went in, and then I found that I could not move. I want to describe this properly, because it is the most instructive thing that has ever happened to me. There was no pain. There was no damage. I was not injured in any way at all. I was simply lying on the bottom of a river with the current moving over me, unable to operate a single muscle in my body. At mid-stage primordial spirit, with 3 divine abilities and a doom bead and a blade art nobody has heard of. I do not need to breathe very often. That is one of the advantages of the realm, but I had never, in 24 years, experienced the sensation of not being able to, and I discovered down there that the body has opinions about that which are not related to the actual supply of air. It went on for a while. I was not counting. And when it stopped, and I could move again, and I came up out of the water on the bank of my own Sect's river, in front of my own house, dripping, I stood there for a second and understood what had just been done to me. It was not an attack. Nothing was broken. It was a demonstration, and the content of the demonstration was, at any moment, for any reason, without warning, I can simply switch you off. I dried myself with a technique, and on the way back through the gate, I noticed something. I felt lighter. Not metaphorically, physically. I checked, and then I checked properly, and then I stood in my own yard with my hands out, looking at my own arms. The curse was gone. All of it. 6 months of accumulated backlash, every strand of it, every trace in every meridian, stripped off me like a wet coat and taken away, and there was not so much as a residue left to work with. I went into the courtyard and bowed and thanked her. She turned around. Thank me? And then she asked whether I was offering my arm as the thank you gift, or my thigh. I have never been able to determine whether that is a joke. I have run it back many times. The delivery is identical to the delivery she uses for real statements. I have concluded that the ambiguity is deliberate and permanent, and that she enjoys it. I did not answer. Answering is also a movement. Then she sat down and asked which one I would prefer to lose next time, if she saw anything that obscene on me again. I said it had been an accident. She laughed. Genuinely, briefly, once. And then she asked for tea. That is the relationship. That is the entire relationship in 90 seconds, and I have had 9 years of it. Total destruction, total repair, an itemized invoice, and then tea. I made Hua Qian Shui because Hong Shu fragrance would have been a statement. And then, sitting at my own table, dripping onto my own floor, I gave her the full report. Let me describe what those reports are like, because they are the most exhausting part of my life, and they happen 3 or 4 times a year. She does not ask questions. She says, continue. That is the entire structure. You talk, and she says, continue, and you talk. And every so often she stops you and says one sentence that reorganizes something you thought you had understood for 2 years. I told her about the gathering. All of it, in order. I told her about the 7-star seal method and handed the book over. She read the whole thing in about the time it takes to drink half a cup of tea. If he created this, then he does have some skill, which is the highest praise I have ever heard her give to anything. Then she added that it would not work on the Misfortune Pearl once it was released, and that in a sealed state it would buy several hours, and that this was fine because several hours is all anything is ever going to buy. I told her about the end of all things and handed over the paper. She looked at it and said nothing. I told her that the person behind the Great Thousand Divine Sects investigation was the end of all things, and that I did not know what that was, and that I had put the question out to the other 3. She said, "You seem to have a natural talent for infiltrating." I said it was all thanks to Senior. She said, "Continue," which I have learned is what she says when she has decided not to comment on a lie. And then I got to the curse, and I said, carefully, that I had acquired the technique through trade and had used it out of curiosity. Just out of curiosity. Just out of curiosity. She put down the cup. Let's just consider it a moment of curiosity then. That is the closest that woman has ever come to letting me get away with something, and I wanted on the record that she knew, and I knew she knew, and she let it stand because the alternative was making me say it out loud, and she had already put me in a river. Then she went upstairs to the bathing room and stopped because I had replaced the wooden tub with a stone one, cut and polished, which had taken 4 months of talisman income. "It seems you are quite capable," she said. I said she flattered me, and she said, without any particular emphasis, "Unfortunately, you only care about me. You went undercover, spouting lies, and your success was all down to luck." I did not respond to that. I want to explain why, because it is the only time I have ever consciously chosen to eat an insult that was factually wrong. The undercover work was not luck. The first 8 months of it were the most sustained fear I have ever operated under, and the dragon took 11 days and nearly killed me twice. But if I had said that, I would have had to explain the 8 months. And the 8 months contained the part where I had no plan at all and was simply delaying, one session at a time, hoping something would present itself. It is fine to say things against your conscience as long as you are consistent. Inconsistency is what gets people opened. So I said, "Senior is joking," and she went to have her bath. And on the balcony afterward, she asked how long I had been carrying the heavenly extreme misfortune pearl. 2 years, I said. "That should be soon," she said. And then she told me not to leave it anywhere else during this period, and not to lose it because I was the one who had started it, and if somebody else opened it, I would be the one who suffered for it, regardless of where I was standing. Then, as her figure was already fading, she added one more thing, and I'll give it to you exactly. You could try spreading the word about the heavenly extreme misfortune pearl in the heavenly sound sect. People targeting you like that might be so scared they'd flee overnight. This was a joke. I am 90% sure it was a joke. I did not do it for the obvious reason, which is that the number of people who want to hurt Chen Guang is perhaps 20, and the number of people who want the heavenly extreme misfortune pearl is every organization on this continent. And then she said, "Remember to take good care of my flowers. If you run away to another place without taking my flowers and trees with you, you know what the consequences will be." And she was gone. And there was a smell of flowers in the courtyard afterward, faint, which is her own and not a perfume, and which I have been able to identify at 40 feet for 9 years. Meanwhile, in 100 Bone Forest, a man was preparing to spend his cultivation on a fight he had been told he could not win. And 1 month later, on the day of the Chief Disciple Challenge, Li Chang came to my gate. Let me place this properly, because the timing is the joke. It was the morning of the single biggest internal event of the decade. Every disciple on the mountain was walking toward 100 Bone Forest, and Li Chang, 24 years old, having just completed a period of seclusion to stabilize a breakthrough, came to my house instead. "Senior brother, I have reached Foundation Establishment late stage, the same realm as you." He bowed, properly. "So I have come today to challenge you." I want to note the arithmetic he had done. He had waited. He had specifically waited until his listed realm matched my listed realm because a victory across a grade gap does not count, and he wanted it to count. I asked whether he wanted to do it now or set a date. He was visibly surprised and slightly put out because he had wanted to set a date, a proper one, registered, with witnesses, and now if he asked for a date, he would look like a man buying time. So he said, "Now." And then he warned me. "I am different from senior brother. I not only challenge others everywhere, I also undergo trials, so I have rich combat experience. Senior brother had better not let his guard down." I said he was exceptionally talented and I would never underestimate him. We went down to the riverbank. He drew a sword. I drew Half Moon the Third. And I'll describe what I saw when I looked at him because it was the first time in 6 years that I had looked at Li Chang properly. He was calm, completely calm on the surface. And underneath it, his chi was doing something I had only ever seen in 2 other people, which is sitting still while being enormous. There was no leakage. There was no tell. 6 years earlier, he had been a boy announcing his intentions in a vegetable patch. Sure enough, the instant he moved, the whole thing came out at once. And it came out like weather. I used Moonslash, first style, the simplest one, out of respect, which he would not have understood and which I am not going to explain to him. First cut, even. Let me stress that. Even. He met the first style of the Heavenly Blade at mid-stage primordial spirit strength suppressed down, and he held it. At Foundation Establishment late stage, on talent and 11 years of grinding. Second cut, he was losing. Third cut, his sword went up out of his hands, end over end, and cut a trench in the bank on the way down, and Half Moon was at his neck. I said, "Brother Han, you flatter me." He stood very still for a moment, then he picked up his sword, and he said, "I was just a little late in getting promoted, senior brother. Once I've solidified my cultivation, I'll come back." And he turned around and walked away. I want to tell you what I thought, standing there, and I am aware of how it sounds. I thought, next time I should use no more than 5. That is not mercy. 5 is not mercy. 5 is a lie with better manners. It is an acknowledgement that a man has worked harder than anybody else in this sect for 11 straight years and deserves for the number to move. I have been adjusting that number for him for a decade. 3, then 5, then 6. He has never once known. Then I went to the chief battle, and I am going to describe it in full because it is the most interesting fight I have ever seen and because everything that happens afterward comes out of it. 100 Bone Forest, a valley. Suan's own residence, which is where a challenger fights, because the challenger gets home ground. There were perhaps 2,000 people around the rim. The valley floor was empty except for the arena, because a fight between primordial spirit completion and late Yuan Shen has a radius, and everybody knows it. Wang Chen found me in the crowd, because of course he did. He was different, I noticed immediately. The dark red aura around him was gone. His cultivation had moved up a stage. The blood demon had been digested, which meant 3 ancient remnant souls were now inside him. All of them past the point of individual resistance, and the question of what happens when they finally coordinate had become a question with a date on it. He asked me who I thought would win. I said Wu Tian, and pointed out that he himself had said last time that Shu An had a 30% chance. And he corrected me, cheerfully. He said that some senior brothers had inspected the venue for irregularities and found nothing, and that a particular senior sister had also inspected it and found nothing. And then he said, the fact that she found nothing means Shu An's preparations were successful. That is how you say a thing in this sect. You do not say the arena is rigged. You say the inspection passed, in a specific tone, and let the listener do it. Shu An was already standing on the high ground. I looked at him properly for the first time in my life. Late Yuan Shen stage, on the surface. Underneath it, forced, consolidated with pills, held together, a foundation that had been stabilized rather than built, and traces of curse everywhere, all over him. 6 months of my work, sitting in a man like rust in a hinge, and his breath was uneven with it. He had taken the pill. He had spent his own foundation to be able to stand there. I would like to record that I felt something at that moment, and that it was not triumph. Wu Tian came down out of the sky, burly, enormous, primordial spirit completion, and his blood chi was so thick it condensed visibly into a beast shape around his shoulders when he flexed. The crowd went up, genuinely, 2,000 people, shouting for him, telling him to cripple the challenger. Because Wu Tian has held the 10th chief position for years, and people like a champion. He asked politely whether they could begin. Shu An said, "Senior brother, please." And Wu Tian threw a punch that took the surface off the arena in rings. It should have ended there. If it had connected, it would have ended there. Let me be honest that I flinched, because I had spent 6 months on this man, and I was about to watch a fist end the entire project. Shu An made a hand seal, and countless plants came up out of the earth in front of him. The fist shattered them. The force kept going, and Shu An was not behind them anymore. He had retreated into the spirit medicine. Wu Tian said the plants would not stop him, and that Shu An's speed was far inferior. He was right about both. He erupted again, harder, and closed the distance, and had his fist a foot from Shu An's chest, and his spiritual energy paused. Describe what that means, because it is the whole fight in one word. Not blocked, paused. For about the length of a swallow, the chi in his own body did not go where he sent it, and in that pause, vines came up out of the ground like blades. Wu Tian was forced back, and he looked at the vines, and he understood, and his blood chi went solid, and the vicious beast condensed around him properly. And he said the only thing anybody said in that entire fight that I have remembered word for word. Shu An, I don't believe you can hold out until I'm poisoned. That is the correct read. Shu An's entire architecture is time. Poison, curse, spirit sealing, illusion. None of it kills, all of it accumulates. And Wu Tian understood that his job was to end the fight before the accumulation reached a threshold, and he committed to it completely. He went wide. He destroyed everything. The spirit medicine, the ground, the vines, layers of the valley floor coming off in sheets, and Shu An advanced into it, not retreated, advanced with a longsword, moving in a way that was sometimes visible and sometimes not. I was genuinely impressed. I want that recorded. The speed and the footwork were better than anything I had seen from a non-combat specialist, and I have thought about that movement since. The sword hit the vicious beast and deflected off it, and the beast began to swell and destabilize, because something had been put into it. Wu Tian realized he was losing control of his own spiritual energy. He abandoned the beast and went straight for Shu An, physically, forcing a body that had stopped cooperating to keep moving. Once I catch you, it will all be over. He was right about that too. He was right about everything except one thing. He coughed blood, and it did not slow him down at all. He reached out to grab Shu An, and he grabbed the man standing next to him. There was nobody standing next to him. 2,000 people made a noise at once. Illusion, I said, out loud, before I could stop myself. And Wang Chen turned and looked at me with real delight and said, "Junior brother, you have good insight. It is indeed an illusion. Senior brother Wu Tian is in an illusion." And then he added, "But I didn't realize when I went in. Sit with that." Wang Chen, a true disciple of the vast heaven sect, mid-stage primordial spirit, carrying 3 remnant souls, a professional investigator, had also been inside the illusion, in the audience, and had not noticed. The illusion was not on Wu Tian, it was on the valley. I began at that point to be genuinely afraid of Shu An, and I'll explain the specific fear. It was not that he was strong. He is not strong. Wu Tian could have killed him with any single blow at any point in that fight. It was that he had built a place over years and then invited a man into it, and every single thing that had happened since had been happening to Wu Tian rather than being done by anybody. I looked at that and thought, I have a courtyard, and he has been sending me spirit medicine for 6 years. The fight went on. Wu Tian was surrounded by spells by the end of it. Deadly poison, curse, spirit sealing, illusion. All of it layered, and a normal primordial spirit would have fallen 4 times over. He did not fall. That is the thing about him. Wang Chen said, I feel like I'm reaching my limit, which was his way of saying that he judged it nearly over. Then Wu Tian went up in flames. His own blood qi burned deliberately and prepared a final attack. And Shu An stood still, and array diagrams came up around him, and every remaining spirit medicine in that valley began feeding into them. I said, out loud, to nobody, what an amazing array. If he were surrounded by divine objects, his power would increase rapidly. Let me flag that sentence, because it is going to matter for the next 100 years of this sect's history, and I said it as an aside. They collided. The formation crumbled under Wu Tian's fist, layer by layer, and I was tracking it precisely. His power flow was clean. His qi diffusion was clean. His spirit extension was working. He could last 2 more breaths. Shu An had won. I want to describe the exact feeling of that moment because I had put 6 months into it and I was watching it pay. I thought, we won. And then Wu Tian's qi took a breath, and he coughed blood. And as he coughed, his power came apart, and the array turned over from a losing position and counterattacked, and it severely injured him, and he went across the valley and hit the ground and did not get up. I want to be extremely precise about what I saw, because I have never told anybody, and I am not certain anybody else in that valley saw it. He blocked his own attack. The vomiting of blood was real, the injury was real, but the moment where his qi stumbled was not the poison. He let it go. He threw it. I sat with that for a long time afterward, because it is a genuinely difficult thing to understand. The chief position is worth more than almost anything in this sect. Privileges, resources, standing, a lineage's protection. Shu An had spent 6 months of agony and a permanent reduction in his own foundation trying to take it. And Wu Tian, who had it, gave it away in a fight he was winning, in front of 2,000 people, at the cost of taking every one of those injuries for nothing. Which means Shu An had bought him, somewhere, at some point, with something. And it was so small and so well placed that I nearly missed it while looking directly at it. And Shu An's techniques are unpredictable enough that nobody in the valley could distinguish the real from the arranged. I planned everything perfectly, I thought, and I miscalculated Wu Tian. The crowd could not work out what had happened. Nobody could. They were asking each other how, and the honest answer going around was that Wu Tian kept getting injured, which is true and explains nothing. So Shu An had won. He had beaten the 10th chief disciple in his own valley, with my curse in his bones, on a pill that was going to cost him a stage. There was one more step, the verification. A figure came down out of the air, purple fairy dress, hair in a girlish bun, landed lightly and did not disturb the dust. Congratulations to junior brother for defeating senior brother Wu Tian. Now it is my turn to verify junior brother's qualifications. Tao Ran, 6th in the chief rankings. And Wang Chen, beside me, said, it's actually the 6th. Usually it should be one of the top 5. I asked whether that made it easier, and he said, not necessarily. For Shu An at Late Yuan Shen, there is no difference between the top 5 and the top 6. She announced the terms. She would suppress her cultivation to Late Yuan Shen, matching him. One technique, resist with everything. If you are still standing afterward, you pass. Shu An took a deep breath and mobilized every single thing he had left. Senior sister, please get started. I'll describe what happened because it took less than a second and I have reconstructed it many times. Spiritual energy whirlwinds appeared around her. She took one step. To everyone watching, she seemed to have moved and also not to have moved, and she was already in front of him. His pupils contracted. There was no time to defend. She put her hand on his chest, and he went backwards off the ground and hit the earth and stayed there, and the blood came out of him in an amount that made the crowd noise stop. She waited. Genuinely, she stood there for a period, giving him the chance to stand. He could not stand. Shu An failed to be promoted to chief. Let me explain what that palm actually was, because it looked like nothing. She had pulled in every scrap of ambient spiritual energy in that valley, including all of Shu An's own spirit medicine, including the residue of his formations, including his entire architecture, and put it inside one unhurried touch. She used his arena as ammunition. That is what the top 10 look like. Not power, understanding, deployed at a speed that removes the concept of a contest. I felt, watching that I could not keep up with either the speed or the power, and she was suppressed. And then Tao Ran turned around and looked at Wu Tian. She had seen it too. Shu An failed to advance, and senior brother Wu Tian was defeated by a challenge from someone of a lower level, losing face as the holder of the chief position. He will be disqualified from competing for the chief position for 10 years. Wu Tian got up. He was in pieces, and he got up. 10 years? On what grounds? And an invisible hand came down out of the sky and put him into the ground. And the sound his bones made carried to the rim of the valley. Since you're not satisfied with 10 years, then 15 will do. He did not object again. Then she looked around at 2,000 people and announced the terms going forward. The chief battle would begin again in 3 years. For the first 3 years, the 10th chief's resources would be divided among the remaining 9. For the second 3 years, if no 10th chief emerged, they would be divided among the strongest cultivators at each realm. 4 at Foundation Establishment, 4 at Golden Core, 4 at Primordial Spirit. And she left. I stood in that valley doing arithmetic. Because Shu An had failed, and Wu Tian had been destroyed, and the top 9 were now substantially richer, and a great many people were suddenly extremely interested in the 10th chief's seat. And in 3 years, ordinary disciples would be eligible for a share of chief-level resources on the basis of being the strongest in their realm. I felt, briefly, that I had a chance at that, and then I noticed myself feeling it and put it down, because a man who wants to be the strongest at his realm is a man who has to be seen being the strongest at his realm. Down in the valley, a woman came to collect Shu An, senior sister Du Lei, 5th in the chief rankings, and his own senior sister. She had recused herself from the verification specifically to avoid the appearance of favoritism, which is why it had been the 6th and not the 5th, and which she explained to him while helping him up. She told him she would take him to their master, and he said no. He said that failure was failure and he could accept it, but that there was one thing he needed to verify. She asked what, and Suan said, "It's my private matter." He was lying on the ground of his own destroyed valley, having spent his foundation and lost everything he had spent 6 months buying, and the thing he was thinking about was a garden. He gave himself 2 or 3 months to heal. If he was lucky, he would keep his cultivation. If he was unlucky, he would rebuild. And then he was going to go and look at the emotion-severing cliff. 2 weeks later, the Corpse God Sect arrived. 32 disciples and 3 elders come south to negotiate access to the Corpse World Flower, because ours was going to open and theirs were not, and because a passage that opens once every 16 or 68 years is not a thing anybody schedules around. They came in the manner of people visiting a farm. I'll be fair and describe what our sect actually is from the outside. We are a first-rank sect in a remote southern prefecture. We have existed at this size for about 40 years. The Corpse God sect has existed at their size for centuries, and their disciples are, on average, 2 full realms above ours at the same age, and they know it. And there is no version of that meeting that does not involve somebody being condescended to. 2 of them were assigned to me. Zhao Bing, bald, burly, mid-stage primordial spirit, and decent about the whole thing in a way I want to acknowledge. And a woman called Su Yang, early Yuanshen stage, cold, precise, and absolutely certain of the shape of the room. Senior sister Fan Tinglian brought them down, apologized to me for being busy, and left, which meant that a Foundation Establishment gardener was now personally escorting 2 primordial spirit cultivators from a great northern sect around a vegetable patch. I greeted them as seniors. Zhao Bing immediately said there was no need, that we were fellow Taoists, and gave me his name. And Su Yang said, "A Foundation Establishment guarding the spirit herb garden. Do you know much about spirit medicine?" I said a little. I took them around. I showed them everything, thoroughly, at the pace you would use for genuinely interested professionals, and I watched both of them get steadily more bored. "That's it?" she said at the end. I said, "Please excuse Fairy's poor impression of this place," and she said, "Just call me senior." Note that Zhao Bing actually stepped in at that point. He raised his voice at her, genuinely raised it, and pointed out that I was the manager of the garden, and that his junior sister did not go out much and was being ignorant, and he apologized to me. I said the poor hospitality had been ours. Then we went to see the Corpse World Flower, and when we got there, she looked at it for 4 seconds and asked me whether I even knew how to do a job. I said I did not manage the Corpse World Flower. Zhao Bing, being helpful, mentioned that it was lacking blood. I said I would have beast blood prepared, and she said, "Human blood is best, preferably human blood with cultivation." I want to walk through the next 30 seconds exactly. I said evenly that I would need to consult my seniors, and she said, "Just use yours. There's nothing to ask permission for. No one will die. Once a day for 14 days is sufficient. At most, the essence and blood will be damaged, and it will be difficult to improve cultivation for several years." 14 days of essence blood from a Foundation Establishment cultivator. She then explained that I was getting a free lesson in cultivating a Corpse World flower out of it, which requires a special method, and that I was fortunate. And then, because I had not immediately agreed, she added the last part. "If you really don't have the courage, I can get your master to agree. It has to be you in the end." Let me be honest about what I felt, and it was not rage, it was recognition. Because that is exactly the sentence Mei Lan would have used, and Fan Yu, and Ding Long. It is the standard sentence of this entire world, and it goes, "I am going to take a thing from you, and if you object, I will go over your head and take it anyway, and the only variable is whether you make it awkward." I lowered my eyes and smiled. In that case, Junior naturally agrees, and then I said that I would still need to ask permission and that my seniors would be available tomorrow and that the details could be conveyed to them then. Her eyes went cold, but there was nothing to object to. I had agreed. Zhao Bing, who had been silent, finally reprimanded her. Junior sister, this is the Heavenly Sound Sect, not our sect. They said they would come back tomorrow. That night, Su Yang separated from the others and went for a walk to look at the mountain. I know what she was thinking, because it is what all of them were thinking, and she said most of it out loud to herself while walking, that this was a remote little sect, that the quality of the disciples was surprisingly poor, that she could not understand why the elders had told them to be cautious, that there was absolutely nothing here to worry about and no need to cooperate at all, and that they should simply take the corpse world flower back. She heard something in the air behind her and turned, and lit up every defensive treasure she owned, and blocked a spear. She actually blocked it. I want to give her that. Early Yuanshan reflexes are genuinely fast. What? Person? She did not finish the word. Purple light went across the sky and her defenses came apart, and her magic treasures disintegrated, and her vision took off and started tumbling, and then she was looking at her own body from an unusual angle, and it did not have a head on it, and she saw the man standing behind it, holding a silver-white blade, and her pupils contracted because it was the Foundation establishment from that afternoon. Senior, what a coincidence, we meet again. I raised the heavenly blade and used mountain suppressing. She got out 4 words. Killing me is tantamount to offending. I'll note that she was going to be right. That was, factually, a correct sentence, and she did not get to finish it. Saber intent came down like a mountain range, and her body came apart, layer by layer, and stopped existing in any recoverable form. Be more careful in your next life. Walking at night is not safe. I looked at her storage ring for a moment, and I left it. Killing a disciple of a great sect is survivable. Robbing one leaves a trail, and the corpse god sect can afford to follow trails. And the difference between an unsolved death and a solved theft is the difference between a diplomatic incident and an execution. Then I went home and made talismans, because I was short on spirit stones. Let me record that accurately. I killed an early Yuanshan cultivator from one of the great northern powers, and then I went home and did piecework, because the rent on a rabbit does not pause for foreign policy. The next morning, I came out of my gate, and the sky above the sect was in turmoil. And a voice came out of it, absolutely furious. Investigate, find out the truth at all costs. I stopped in the road. I want to describe my actual thinking because I was frightened, and I was frightened of precisely the wrong thing. I thought, the Tianyuan God sculpting mirror. It is a sect treasure. Not the ordinary heavenly origin mirrors that the law enforcement hall uses for routine work. The real one, the one that reflects the past directly, that concealment does not work on, that has been used twice in the history of this sect. There is no version of me that survives that mirror being pointed at that road. So I went to work, and I waited, and I did not go anywhere unusual. By noon, nothing. The law enforcement hall had not appeared anywhere. Nobody had come to the garden. The corpse god sect had not come to look at their flower. I listened to the rabbits talk, which is a real sentence, because the rabbit talks to Wu Qing and to Guo Xin constantly, and I sit in the garden and pretend to work. Recently, it seems that all the spirit herb gardens have been humiliated by the corpse god sect, and they can't even refute it. You mustn't bump into anyone, Guo Xin said. Rabbit, are the corpse god sect people your friends on the Dao? Wu Qing asked, and the rabbit said, Master, you must work hard, which is not an answer, and which nobody noticed was not an answer, and which is how that animal has operated for 6 years. The third day, Wang Chen finally arrived. I had been expecting him since the first morning. 3 days is slow, for him, and slow means something. He was waiting at my gate, and he was surrounded by blood-red qi, much thicker than before, which meant the blood demon possession was at its final stage, which meant he was about to go up another rank. He asked whether I had been in contact with the corpse god sect's disciples. I said I had. He asked how they seemed. I said, tactfully, that they seemed like a large sect, and he laughed and said, so you're looking down on them, are you? Which is the kind of thing he says specifically to see whether you will agree with him about something you should not agree with him about. I said nothing and nodded slightly, which is the correct answer. He asked who I had met. I said Su Yang, and he said, that's why I came to find Junior Brother. Su Yang was killed the night she made contact with you. I said, killed? And produced an expression of shock, correctly timed, which I had rehearsed in the previous 72 hours. He suggested we talk inside, and then he sat in my courtyard and drank my tea and told me what had actually happened, and it is the single funniest thing that has ever occurred in this sect. The corpse god sect had sent 32 disciples. 10 of them had been killed that night. 10. Not by me. I killed 1. 9 other people, independently, without coordination, in the same 8 hours, had each individually decided to solve the same problem. Because that delegation had spent a week being condescending to a demonic sect, and the demonic sect had reached a collective decision without ever holding a meeting. I'll describe my reaction. I laughed, out loud in front of Wang Chen before I could stop it. He enjoyed that enormously. Then he walked me through the investigation. The first person identified was Wu Tian, freshly destroyed, freshly humiliated, motive obvious, and whose master had personally examined him and confirmed he was too injured to stand. His master had confirmed it. Wang Chen said that part with a particular emphasis and then moved on. The second was Du Lei, fifth chief disciple, who had been caring for the injured Shu An all night, and Shu An and Yan could both testify to it, and she is a chief and cannot be arrested without concrete evidence. The rest had used more subtle methods and had not been detected after 3 days. I asked why they had not used a magic treasure to check. And Wang Chen smiled and said, "It wasn't one of our sect members who died. Why would we use a magic treasure? That is the whole thing. That is the entire architecture of this sect in one sentence. Killing a fellow disciple is unsurvivable because the law enforcement hall will spend a treasure on it. Killing a foreigner is a paperwork event. The rage was theater. The furious voice in the sky was a performance for a visiting delegation, and the investigation was a formal decision not to have one. I asked whether the corpse god sect would let it go, and Wang Chen said, 'Who knows?' and finished my tea. They did not let it go. Their elder, Bo Dao Ren, a man with strength comparable to Yuan Feng, spent 3 days demanding an answer, and on the 4th day, one of his remaining disciples, a young man who had been issuing open challenges around the sect, was found in a river, and Bo Dao Ren's chi went up over the mountain and stayed there, and it became extremely clear that there was going to be a battle inside our own gates, which we would lose expensively even if we won. Elder Lin Shui came down and offered to show him around. Let me describe this because it is the best piece of work I have ever watched anybody do. He was insulted by the offer. Obviously he was. A stroll after 10 of his disciples had been killed. She insisted, politely, and led him and one companion up a mountain path, and they came around a shoulder of rock and saw a tower. This is the lawless tower. Ordinary disciples cannot enter, nor are they qualified to. He asked where it had come from. He could not see through it, and he had never heard of it, and that combination is not a thing that happens to a man at his level. She smiled and did not answer, and gave them both something to wear so they would not be affected, and took them inside. 5th floor, cell 1. And in it a disheveled man with weak breathing, Yuan Feng. Understand what Bo Dao Ren was looking at. That is a full elder of his own sect, a man whose strength is comparable to his own. He had been missing for 2 years, and the assumption had been capture or death, and here he was, in a cage, at early Yuan Shen's stage, having lost most of what he was, being fed on continuously by a building. Elder Lin Shui said, "Yuan Feng, we meet again." And Yuan Feng looked up, and did not care about her at all, and said, "It's no use you coming. I won't say anything. See that person. I want to see him. Let him come. This time I'll tell you everything." And she said, "He is not a disciple of my lineage, so I cannot order him around." And he roared at her, a genuine roar from a man with nothing left, that she was the acting sect leader, that of course she could command him. And she said, "You seem dissatisfied with your situation." And he said, "All of you combined are no match for me." And she said, "You mean you want to meet someone who is your rival?" And Yuan Feng stopped. I want to describe what Bo Dao Ren and his companion saw at that moment because it is the entire negotiation and it took 2 seconds. They saw an elder of their own sect, a man who had just declared that everyone in this building combined could not match him, flinch at the suggestion of meeting one specific person, not a person he could name. He would not name him. He simply wanted him brought and was afraid of him, and both of those were true at once. Elder Lin Shu said she would go and ask for him, politely, and turned and left, and walked them back down out of the tower. And then she said, "Having strolled around, are you two refreshed? Shall we talk about cooperation?" They signed that afternoon. Deep cooperation, joint access, protection for the remaining Corpse God sect disciples under law enforcement hall authority, meaning no more of them could be killed. And nobody in that negotiation knew. Not Elder Lin Shu, not Bo Dao Ren, not one person in that building. The single most effective piece of leverage in a treaty between a first-rank southern sect and a great northern power was the fact that an outer cliff gardener had once said 2 words through a cage door and left before the man inside could ask how. I found out about it 3 days later from a public notice board. Life went back to normal after that, and I want to spend a moment on normal, because the normal is what the whole thing is for. The rabbit was approaching foundation establishment perfection, which he mentioned constantly. He came into the courtyard one evening extremely pleased with himself and announced that he was going to find Tang Kai because Tang Kai had improved a great deal lately. He even avoids hitting vital points when I hit him now. He raised those 2 single-handedly, he informed me. Him, personally. Tang Kai and Wen Hao have, in fairness, spent 3 years being raised primarily by a rabbit, which is a sentence I have made peace with. I asked what he had been teaching Tang Kai. Body techniques, he said. His friends on the Dao had given Lord Rabbitface and suggested that Tang Kai study movement arts. I asked what he was planning to teach him, and he said, "Just tell him to dodge. There's no need to teach him anything." I did not offer an opinion, and let me note that Tang Kai can now take a beating from a foundation establishment perfection spirit beast without serious injury, so I am not certain the rabbit is wrong. The bamboo in my courtyard had grown taller than the wall, and there were shoots under it. I told the rabbit to dig them up and take them to Wu Qing and to tell her to give them to the cafeteria staff who would prepare them for her because that is a thing the cafeteria has been doing for 6 years on a standing arrangement funded by me. He asked how to dig them. I said with his claws. He said, oh, and squatted down and started digging with his claws, which at Foundation Establishment Perfection go through packed earth like it is not there. And I stood and watched a golden core track spirit beast harvest vegetables. I'll be honest about why I remember that afternoon. Because it was the shoots. The grandmother had been worried about the shoots. And meanwhile, over at White Moon Lake, a conversation was happening that I did not learn about for 2 years. Guan Yue, one of Tang Kai's 2 childhood friends, the girl, now at Qi Refining Stage 5, grown up and graceful and doing well, was trying to get him help. She had gone to senior sister Wu Jing about it. She had asked Elder Ling. She had offered spirit stones and been told they would not take spirit stones for it. And a woman called Fairy Hua, cold, elegant, extremely senior, overheard and came over and told her kindly that she was helping in the wrong way, that she and Tang Kai were from different worlds now, and that visible help from her would cause him countless problems, and that the correct approach was to help secretly. And then she said she was going to the emotion-severing cliff anyway, and would ask. So the 3 of them went and found the disciple who manages the outer sect roster, and asked about Tang Kai's removal, and the man was terrified of Fairy Hua, and said immediately, Senior sister, no, it's not that I don't want to help. Tang Kai has already been removed from the list. And Fairy Hua said, when? About a year ago. Wu Jing worked it out first, before I arrived, before any of this. And Fairy Hua asked the actual question, which was, so Tang Kai does not need to leave the sect. Who did it? And the man hesitated, and then said, it is the Cliff Master. The Cliff Master of an entire branch had personally struck a Stage 1 outer disciple's name off a removal list. They could not understand it. They stood outside afterward and went through it. Guan Yue asked whether Tang Kai was special in some way. Wu Jing asked whether his cultivation was stable. Fairy Hua asked whether he had encountered anything strange. And Guan Yue said, Lord Rabbit, I remember him mentioning him, but he didn't go into details. And Wu Jing thought for a long time and said, Emotion-Severing Cliff seems to have only 1 rabbit spirit pet. And Guan Yue asked, excitedly, who the amazing senior brother was who had done all this. And Wu Jing said, it is Chen Guang, junior brother, the one who mentored Tang Kai. And let me give you Guan Yue's reaction exactly, because it is the single most useful thing that has happened to me in 9 years. Her joy vanished, replaced by disappointment. She had thought Tang Kai was being protected by some powerful senior brother, and it turned out to be an ordinary inner disciple. They stopped investigating. That is what 9 years of gardening buys. Not a disguise, something better. A reputation so specifically unremarkable that when people find the evidence, they discard it. And around then, the Corpse God sect came back to teach me formations. Because a list had gone out and my name was on it, and the Corpse World Flower was going to open and admit 26 disciples into the Corpse Realm, and one of them was going to be me. I want to explain how much I did not want this. The Corpse Realm is a territory. There are regions in it graded by cultivation, and things living in it that nobody has cataloged. And the rule is that if you enter without knowing the 3 elements formation, you are deposited at random. And if you are deposited somewhere above your grade, you do not come back. I went to my master and asked to give the place away. I said, honestly, that my cultivation was shallow and that a senior brother or senior sister would make better use of it. He was silent for a long time. And then he handed me a piece of wood the size of a thumb and said, go and get busy. I appraised it outside. Jade Ruyi. Upon receiving a powerful attack, it automatically activates a defense capable of blocking a single blow from a primordial spirit and performs a random teleportation exceeding 1,000 miles. He had read the roster. He had seen a Foundation Establishment gardener listed alongside spirit refining cultivators. He had understood that the spot was not optional and that his disciple was going to die, and he had given him a way not to, and said 4 words and gone back to his tea. The formation lessons were taught by Zhao Bing and a woman called Fairy Shui, and I'll describe them because they are the funniest thing in this section and because they cost me a month. The 3 elements formation is genuinely difficult, heaven, earth, and human, and the part we needed was the human origin array, and it is the single most complex thing I have ever attempted. I have no talent for formations, none. This is a real, measurable deficiency, and I have made peace with it. Fairy Shui drew the character for formation on the ground and explained for an entire day, and by the end of it, she had developed a headache. I asked as few questions as I could physically manage. Even so, on the way out, she told Zhao Bing that she had never seen such a difficult person to teach, that it was a waste of a spot, and that if he could not grasp the basics after a month, she did not know what she would do. She was right, incidentally. Her assessment of my formation talent was accurate. So I went to the Lawless Tower and made Yuan Feng teach me. I brought a book of the formations. He saw it and frowned and asked where I had got it. I said I would tell him if he taught me. He guessed immediately. The corpse god sect had come for cooperation. Therefore, the corpse world flower was about to bloom. And then he relaxed, visibly, because that meant his sect was here and there was a route out. And I appraised him and read exactly what he was planning, which was to stall, and to hope that his people would get near the heavenly fragrance Tao flower and use it as leverage to have the corpse heart released and himself resurrected. So I waved at him. I want to explain the wave. I beckon. That is all. A small gesture with 2 fingers, the way you would call somebody closer. He cannot come closer. There is a cage. And the first time I did it, months earlier, I had followed it with 2 words, and the second time with 2 more. And by now, the gesture itself has become the thing. His expression changed the instant my hand moved. I lowered my hand, apologetically, and said, I forgot you can't come over, so let me tell you something else instead. After I tell you, you'll be happy to teach me formations. And then I leaned toward the cage and told him that a corpse god sect spy had died outside the sect before the delegation arrived. He understood immediately what that meant about the security of his route out, and his eyes went wide with fury, and I packed up my books and stood up to leave. It seems you don't want to teach me anymore. Spring, see you another time. Teach, I'll teach. Let me note the speed. There was no pause, because it is not that I threatened him. I have never threatened that man once. It is that the intervals between my visits keep getting longer, and if I walked out that day, he might not see me for years, and years is a long time in a building that is eating you. I said, that's quite surprising. Since that's the case, you should teach me carefully. It's fine if you want to stall for time. It's useless anyway. And he taught me for a full month. During the day, I asked him questions. At night, I used clear mind to force it in. And near the end, I had him simulate scenarios, every failure mode, every variation of what could go wrong in the human origin array. Because when it is a matter of life and death, you do not learn the formation, you learn what it does when it breaks. He was appalled by my talent throughout. He said so repeatedly. He said I had no basic knowledge whatsoever, which was true. And in return, because I am not a monster, I gave him something. He revealed the method for cracking the seal on one of his own confiscated magic treasures, which allowed the Heavenly Sound Sect to obtain a complete and functional item they had been unable to open for 2 years. So I filed a contribution report and got credit for it. And that, I want to note, is the 3rd major thing I have been officially credited with in this sect that I did not do, and the 2nd one that came out of a cage. Now, by this point, I had 211 days of accumulated cultivation, and both bars were nearly full. And I'll tell you about the last thing I did before I went into the corpse realm, because Xuan had been recovering for a year. His medicine had started arriving at my garden again from 100 Bone Forest with a polite note. Nian brought it personally now. He was going to come and look. He had told his junior sister so, repeatedly, over a year, from a bed, and then from a chair, and then from a wheelchair. And the corpse realm takes a minimum of 6 months and possibly a year, and I was about to be gone for all of it. So on a night in mid-December, I finished my breakthrough. I want to give you the panel because it is the last time in this story that the numbers matter. Name, Chen Guang. Age, 25. Cultivation, late Yuan Shen stage. Cultivation technique, Heavenly Sound 100 turns and Hongmeng Heart Sutra. Divine abilities, 9 turns substitute death. Daily appraisal, clear mind, hidden spirit reappearance, divine might, withered wood meets spring. Late Yuan Shen stage, at 25. Publicly, foundation establishment, late stage. The gap between those 2 lines is 6 years old, and it is the only thing I have ever built that I am actually proud of. And then I went to 100 Bone Forest. It was the 2nd time. The first had been a year earlier at mid-stage primordial spirit, and it had put him in a bed for months. This one was going to be different, because I had a whole stage on him now, and because he had spent his own foundation on the chief challenge and was down to mid-stage himself. I stood outside the valley in the trees, in the dark. I could not go in. His ground, his formations, his medicine, all of it reinforced after the challenge, and he had spent a year with nothing to do but improve it. So I closed my eyes and used the nameless manual. Describe what that is like, because it is my favorite thing in the world, and I have never been able to tell anybody. You stop looking. And then the world comes apart into points of light, every trace of spiritual energy, everywhere, at once. Individual plants, each one distinct. The interference pattern where a formation crosses a wall. The currents in the air where a warm slope meets a cold one. It is not sight. It is the whole valley arriving. And then, a long way off, in the middle of all of it, 2 figures standing in a courtyard. One robust and slightly frayed, one weaker and orderly. Found him. I picked up a spear. An ordinary spirit spear, the cheap kind, 4 stones from any stall on the market, because whatever I threw was not going to survive the throw. Purple chi over everything. Late Yuanshen's strength poured into a shaft that was never built to hold it, and it began to crack in my hands before I had finished. And then hidden spirit reappearance on top of that, which doubles what you were already doing. The spear was coming apart before it left my hand. Let me state the intent precisely, because it matters, and because it is the only thing about this that I would defend in front of anybody. There was no killing intent in it. I did not want him dead. A dead true disciple with major merits triggers a real law enforcement hall response. And a real response means the Tianyuan God sculpting mirror. And the mirror means I'm found inside a day. I wanted him sealed because he had spent 15 years quietly putting his hands inside other people's foundations. And the one thing he had never once considered was that somebody might do it back. I threw it, and I did not stay to watch. Inside the valley, Shu An was sitting in his courtyard, looking at the stars. Nian had asked him why he was outside when his injuries had not healed, and he had said he needed to confirm one thing. And she had asked what, and he had said, find out why I was ambushed. And then his pupils contracted. A beam of purple light came across the top of the valley wall. His formation was reinforced. It shattered anyway. Instantly, the way a plate shatters, his defensive treasures came up. They came apart like clay, and the spear went through his stomach and did not continue because it was never going to continue. It broke, and the purple chi went out of it into him, and it went everywhere at once. Flesh and blood tore, meridians crushed. It hit the primordial spirit itself. Blood came through his skin. He screamed for some time. Nian got to him, and she was crying and asking what they had to do, that they would do it. All of it, anything. And Shu An, on the ground, with his blood and his own dirt, gripped her hand and started laughing. I understand. I get it. She asked what, and he said, spirit sealing technique. He had it. Lying in the dirt, dying, with no evidence and no witness and no name, he had it. He wants to shut down my cultivation, preventing me from making any progress, and to repay me in kind. She said there was nobody with a spirit sealing technique that strong, that there could not be anybody that terrifying behind this. She had researched the backgrounds. And he said, there's no mistake. And then, as he was losing consciousness, let me go to a motion-severing cliff, and see. I'm sure I can find some clues. I was already out of the forest by then, walking home, and I want to tell you what I was thinking, because it was not triumph either. I was thinking about the schedule. The formation had been reinforced, but not by much. That would change. Next time, they would be guarding it properly. The first strike had been a year ago. This one was tonight. 3 months to a year is a big enough jump that even a watcher gets impatient, so make the next one a year, and after that, vary it. And I would have to find him again, because he might move, and I do not know divination, and it would be much easier if I did. I got back to the courtyard around dawn. I'll describe the last few minutes properly, because this is where I want to leave it. The bamboo had grown over the wall again. The peach tree had put out fruit. The rabbit was asleep on the table with his face in a puddle of his own drool, wearing a golden core collar that cost more than my house. And the heavenly fragrance Dao flower was where it had been for 6 years, in the 3rd row, behind a screen of extremely boring, ordinary spirit medicine, in front of a shack with 2 holes in the roof that I have still never repaired. I watered it. 6 years earlier, I had been a 19-year-old with a 1,000-stone fine, 10 stones a month, and a debt I could not clear in 8 years, sitting on a floor next to a body I had made because a beautiful woman needed a scapegoat, and I was the cheapest one available. That morning, I had a doom bead in my pocket, a seat at a table with 4 monsters, a treaty between 2 great powers that ran through a sentence I had said through a caged door, and a top 5 true disciple of this sect lying in his own courtyard with my spear in him, who has never once learned my name. And I still had to be at the garden by first light because my shift starts then and Guo Xin cannot manage the drainage. That is the trade. Let me be honest, that I made it on purpose and that I would make it again. But I want to be equally honest about the other half. The flower is not a gift. It never was. It is a hook, and I am the worm. And the woman who baited it told me on day 1 that if it dies, I die. And every single thing I have, the Hongmeng Heart Sutra, the concealment, the blade art, the manual that makes me invisible, all of it came off that hook. Every spy who has ever come to this mountain came for that flower. Every one of them has to walk past me first. That was always the point. I am not the gardener. I am the tripwire. And the tripwire has spent 6 years quietly getting strong enough to kill the things that trip it, which was not in anybody's plan, including hers. And Shu An is going to recover. He is going to spend a year in a chair, and then he is going to have his junior sister push him up the road to a motion-severing cliff, and he is going to stop outside my fence, because he will not come in, because he is careful. And he is going to look into a small courtyard at a peach tree, a stand of bamboo, and 1 unremarkable seedling in the 3rd row. And he is going to recognize it. He knows spirit medicine better than any man alive. He has seen the records in a ruin somewhere. He will know exactly what that plant is and exactly what it means about who is standing behind the man who waters it. And it is going to reorganize his entire understanding of the last 3 years of his life in about 4 seconds. I know that is coming. I have known for months. I am still going to be standing there. Same robe, same watering can. Because the entire trick, the only trick I have ever had, is that nobody in 9 years has ever once believed that the most dangerous thing on this mountain is the thing they walked past on the way in. Let him come and look at the flower. I have been out here the whole time.